Hello everyone, I am Sherlock Holmes. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment, letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. Imagine that suddenly one of you gets a viper and bites you and the viper leaves, and what do you have left? Poison. This case shook Mexico, the Catholic Church of that country, and the parishioners who could not understand who had the motive to take the life of the young deacon, especially when the main and only suspect was a priest who had been in the priesthood for more than 20 years. This is a shocking story of a fatal attack whose motive was never entirely clear. So what happened? The story of Father Francisco Javier Bautista Avalos takes place in the Miguel de Allende neighborhood in Mexico City's Tan municipality for over 15 years. Father Francisco Javier Bautista Avalos served as the pastor of Cristo Salvador Catholic Church. He shared with parishioners who attended out of conviction and Christian faith, participating in several activities promoted by the church. He also attended social events within the community without a cassock like an ordinary citizen. Father Francisco had been admired, respected, and loved by his parishioners since his arrival at the church in 2004. The Miguel Hidalgo neighborhood is named after the military priest who played a role in the initial phase of the Mexican Independence War and is also known as the father of the country. This neighborhood is known for its high-quality services and education, as well as its bustling commercial activity. A lot of people, both residents and visitors, go through this important area of the Mexican capital every day. Many of these visitors sought Father Francisco, who is believed to possess both soul and body. Healing towers on Alfredo B. Bonfi Street, it was common to see long lines of believers gathering at the church, especially on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. On these days, Fr. Francisco received local and foreign parishioners of all ages and social backgrounds. They came with the hope of being heard and having their problems resolved during these 3 days. Each week, parents could be seen outside the parish with portraits of their children. Some had addiction problems, others had disappeared, and some had been ABD-ed, putting their lives in danger. People with physical pain or spiritual afflictions also came to the parish. Cases of demonic possession and evil spirits deserved special mention, although there were very few. They too received attention. Father Francisco had become famous for his healing acts and exorcisms. This way of proceeding, very different from that of most priests, led him to be a regular guest on television shows. Specializing in supernatural topics, he also published the book Psalms and Prayers to Heal the Soul. All this contributed to the priest's reputation and the spread of his special abilities. There was a particular ceremony that made him look very powerful. Sometimes the rite occurred in a temple bench corner, on other occasions in front of the atrium or standing face to face with the believer. In any of these forms, the rite of reception was fulfilled, during which the parishioner unburdened their sorrows while the priest listened and prayed. The duration varied according to the seriousness of the case. If necessary, the religious man turned to one side and with a subtle movement of his head, he indicated to Guile to pass him the oil that Friar Francisco would then smear on the believer to end the reception. For the closest parishioners, Guile's presence was normal. It was said that the father discovered that the 60-year-old woman had a special gift. That is why she was his shadow in every healing act or exorcism. She lived a few blocks from the church and, together with her husband, sold various religious articles outside the temple before becoming the pastor of Cristo Salvador Catholic Church. Father Francisco addressed the Maria Reina Catholic Church, another nearby temple also in the Miguel Hidalgo neighborhood. Since those years, he had already begun to become famous for his exorcism rituals. In fact, there are still those who claim that he received training in the Vatican for this type of practice. On the days when the rite of reception wasn't held at the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church, the temple was still very crowded because of the masses that started very early in the morning. Father Francisco received the sick who came to Mass as early as 7 a.m. and anointed the foreheads of the believers to heal them. The versatile religious man wasn't only dedicated to his ecclesiastical duties, but was often seen sharing and accompanying the community in various social and sporting events as well as during different celebrations and other community activities, he enjoyed great admiration and much appreciation from his parishioners, who thanked him for being so close to his community. In addition, he promoted VAR local improvements and encouraged the development of recreational and sports activities. The closest members of the parish believed blindly in this shepherd of souls and testified to the supposed miracles and healings performed by the priest. That is why they followed Friar Francisco with unwavering faith, completely convinced of the religious vocation he discovered when he was very young. Hugo Leonardo Abendano also found his vocation at a young age, a boy from the community, who, as the years went by, became Father Francisco's right-hand man. Hugo accompanied and assisted him in different areas within the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church. Leo, as he was affectionately called, was born in Mexico in 1990 into a traditional family. He grew up with his parents and his brother Jose Vicente Avendano. He always liked to study, and since he was a child, he was very intelligent, polite, and kind to people. He had the desire to help and serve them through his faith in the Catholic religion. While still very young, Leo decided to become a priest after finishing his high school studies and chose to study theology at Intercontinental University. After graduating, he decided to continue his education at the same university and enrolled in the master's program in psychoanalytic psychotherapy. He combined his subjects with myology to get the specialization as a missionary and evangelizer, while also focusing on the scientific principles of psychology to have the necessary tools to analyze mental disorders. The young man had a very clear religious stance that he used to share in his posts on social media. He expressed his ideas in favor of the church, as well as his criticisms and disagreements regarding certain aspects of society. Like many young people, Leo liked to travel around his country and the world he also enjoyed. Learning about new cultures at some point in 2012, Father Francisco and the young man's paths crossed, and over the years they became very close. The priest knew Leo's family well. The attachment became stronger in 2015 when Leo became his deacon. He was a very cheerful and devoted young man, always helping the priest and the community at the parish. Given the close relationship between Father Francisco and Leo, it was usual for them to schedule different meetings in the evening hours. Many of these meetings extended into the early hours of the morning when each would resume their personal agendas. The last time Jose heard from his brother Leo was Tuesday, June 11th, 2019. As usual, the young deacon and Father Francisco would meet that evening to work on some church business. The young man was wearing blue pants, a light shirt, and black shoes on Wednesday morning. June 12th, Jose was a little concerned when he tried to reach Leo and was unable to speak to him. Leo hadn't returned home either then. Josue received a call that increased his distress. Father Francisco contacted him to say that the young deacon had not shown up at the church. Despite their agreement at that time, there was a lot of uncertainty in the community. People were afraid because by the middle of 2019, the violence figures in the Mexican capital were alarming. Authorities had registered nearly 700 homicide victims, almost 30 kidnappings, and more than a dozen femicides. In addition to these worrying statistics, the cases of Aide Mendoza and Norberto Rono had a deep impact on public opinion. 2 students were killed. In strange circumstances at that time, the authorities had not shown truly solid PR press in clarifying what had happened and catching those responsible. Amid this climate of great uncertainty, Jose decided to go to the prosecutor's office and report. The disappearance of his brother he was attended to at the office specialized in the search location and investigation of missing persons, where he said that Leo had gone to the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church the day before around 11 p.m. He specified that neither he nor the rest of the family knew where the young deacon was at that moment. According to 2 host statements to the authorities, his brother was going to meet with the parish priest to make the search easier. The authorities asked him what route Leo regularly took in detail. Jose told them that he normally took the route from his house in the Alo neighborhood in Iztapalapa, along Axis 3, and then the inner loop to the exit of the Tan municipality. Finally, he joined the viaduct that led him to Inent Avenue and from there to the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church. The information about Leo's usual route was the starting point for the official investigations to find, hopefully at some point along the route, some clue about his whereabouts. Finally, Hose declared that his brother had sent a message to a friend on the night of June 11th, telling him that he would meet Father Francisco at the church and stay overnight at his house, while Hosway was giving his statement at the prosecutor's office. That same Wednesday morning, June 12th, the Secretariat of Citizen Security received a call reporting a suspicious car that had been abandoned in the Heroes to 1910 neighborhood on Eucalypt Street and Louisiana Marina Road. Ernestina Godoy said elements of the Secretariat of Citizen Security arrive at the scene at 10 a.m., who apprehend the body of a person inside the vehicle and give notice immediately to the police authorities from the public prosecutor's office. And police officers responded to the call and went to the scene to begin investigations when they inspected the gray Chevrolet vehicle. They discovered the body of a male in the back seat, estimated to be 25 to 30 years old. He was covered with a yellow blanket. The investigators immediately requested the presence of forensic medicine and criminalistics technicians. During the preliminary inspection, the experts determined that there were signs of physical abuse on several parts of the young man's body, especially on his face. They even recorded that he had lost some teeth because of the violent attack. They concluded that his life might have been taken by asphyxiation, but they would have to carry out all the parent studies to determine and clarify what happened, as well as to identify the victim. The forensic analysis allowed for the identification of the body found inside the car. It was the young Deacon Hugo Leonardo Avendano Chavez, who at only 29 years old had been killed by pressure applied to his neck to prevent the passage of air after a fierce and very violent attack. With all this information, the authorities provided Hose with the details of the mob finding. From that moment, his brother's report changed from the office specializing in disappearances to the section of the prosecutor's office in charge of homicides. Expressions of grief and demands for justice were not long in coming. Visibly moved family members, friends, students, and members of the community started different protest actions. It was a time when the feelings of loss in society were at their peak, since just 2 days before public opinion had heard the news of the kidnapping and subsequent fatal attack against Norberto Rono, a student of international marketing at Petal University. Students from several academic and educational institutions joined together to make a video that circulated on different social media networks with great sadness but also firmness. They demanded that the authorities fulfill their duty to protect citizens and conduct a swift investigation to clarify what happened and arrest the offenders in the video. The young people demanded justice for Leo and for the thousands of missing people in the country. They identified themselves as members of several public and private universities, including Pedregal University, the National Polytechnic Institute, the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and the National Pedagogical University, among others. They raised demands for peace and tranquility, expressing their desire to go out safely to study work and have fun without threats to their safety and risks that would prevent them from returning home safe and sound. They demanded their right to live in a safe country. Francisco said a day after the discovery on Thursday, June 13, 2019, Leo's body was taken to the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church, where his funeral wake would be held during the night. Father Francisco officiated the funeral mass in honor of his deacon and later offered some statements to the media. Francisco said that there are wolves, right? And this is intensifying. I mean, not only are the two students now being promoted on television, but what about the others, right? The parents, the children, those who have suffered all this. What happens, right? How many people are suffering during his statements? The priest referred to how moved the community was, not only by Leo's case, but by other cases that had also resonated. In public opinion, he regretted that episodes such as those that had occurred were becoming a daily occurrence. Robberies, unlawful deprivations of liberty, and crimes against life, all of these were keeping parents, children, and the community in general in constant anguish. Francisco said it is clear that what all this caused, what they promised, right, that they do their job, but I repeat that they also involve us so that these things decrease, despite the difficult circumstances in which he was expected to be moved by losing his right-hand man and the person closest to him. The priest acted completely normally during his statement 3 days after Leo's farewell. Mass authorities issued an arrest warrant for Father Francisco. The prosecutor's office, as well as Mexico's Attorney General's office, had indisputable evidence. Incriminating him based on those reports on June 16th, the controlled judge issued the arrest warrant 3 days later on Wednesday, June 19th. 2019, the priest was arrested and transferred to the Orient Men's Prison located in Mexico City. The investigations carried out allowed the Attorney General's office to obtain several videos in which Leo was observed in his vehicle arriving at the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church a little after 11 p.m. Also, it was recorded that his departure was at 3:16 a.m. on Wednesday, June 12th. At that time, the deacon left the church accompanied by Father Francisco. The cameras located at different points along the public road captured at about 3:26 a.m. Leo's vehicle during its journey from the church along the Picacho-Esco highway until it reached the place where it was finally located, in the Heroes the 1911-10 neighborhood. The arrival of a second vehicle was also recorded. A few minutes later in the video, it was seen clearly that Father Francisco boarded that car and left the place after about 13 minutes. Finally, on Wednesday, June 12th, a little after 4 a.m., the security cameras captured the second vehicle as it drove down the Picacho-Esco highway. It was driving away from the area where Leo's vehicle was abandoned and where his body was eventually located. Rodrigo Diarra said at 10 p.m. the victim sent a message to a person close to him stating that he would spend the night at the suspect's home. According to the C5 camera images, the vehicle remained inside the home of the suspect without moving from 11:04 p.m. on June 11th until 3:16 a.m. on June 12th. That is 4 hours and 12 minutes at 3:48 a.m. The C5 camera again captured the vehicle heading towards the place where the victim was found, according to Attorney General's office sources. Mexico City authorities requested the issuance of an immigration alert to prevent the priest from leaving the country. This measure was justified because they had a recording of the priest on board a vehicle on his way to the airport. Ernestine Ado said our investigation work will be rigorous. It will continue to be rigorous. Strictly adhering to the law respecting the guarantees and human rights of the victims, their families, and those who are accused of any alleged responsibility. Two strong pieces of evidence further implicated. Father Francisco I was the discovery of a message in which Leo told him that he had arrived at the church. This important piece of information was obtained after the young deacon's phone was checked. The second piece of evidence was that the investigating authorities found the keys to Leo's vehicle in the priest's possession. Despite the evidence against him, the priest denied having met with his deacon. He referred to the call he had with Hose a few hours after Leo's disappearance, in which he affirmed that Leo had not attended the scheduled meeting. Although the investigations pointed directly at the priest, his parishioners believed in his innocence and were ready to defend him. Vehemently, reactions were not long in coming. As soon as the arrest became known, a group from the community organized to protest and affirm that the most serious of injustices were being committed. Anna Lilia said, "Unfair, terribly. Unfair. We are very dismayed and hurt. The authorities are not doing things properly and are crucifying a just man, an incomparable man. We would like to have a high politician." Like him, Garcia Hernandez said, "How is it possible that they believe that for God's sake have all of you lost your feelings? Have you all, everybody is sensationalist. They make up stories for God's sake and they still eat and sleep peacefully. I can't believe it. God is watching us." The case soon became the topic of conversation and speculation. Both publicly and privately, rumors were everywhere, prompting Attorney General Ernestina Godoy to address the gossip. Officially, she ruled out the possibility that Leo had been kidnapped by illegal groups, noting that the family had not received any ransom calls asking for money. She also dismissed the theory of a crime of passion. Despite some media spreading this news, Godoy emphasized that based on the characteristics of the case, it was being investigated as a homicide, Jose Avendano said. According to information published by some printed and media news outlets, the authorities had found some very compromising pictures on the deacon's tablet. These appeared to document intimate meetings involving Father Francisco and other priests, leading to speculation that extortion was the main reason for his death. However, this theory was not confirmed by investigators, and the case followed a different line of inquiry. The victims' relatives also dismissed this hypothesis entirely. Lord Morgia, an investigative journalist with access to the case, File gave a scoop on a TV show. She confirmed the line of investigation that authorities were pursuing after the arrest of Father Francisco, who was considered the main suspect in the deacon's death. The hypothesis involved extortion, but not due to passion. Instead, Leo had apparently uncovered several irregularities in the administration of parish resources based on the data in her possession. Lure reported that authorities had found compelling evidence pointing directly at the priest according to Mexican law. Investigators had between 3 and 24 months to gather all the evidence needed to prove their case and clarify the events as part of the important revelations. The journalist highlighted Leo's lifestyle, which seemed to involve expenses far exceeding those of an ordinary student. As Leo did not work and dedicated himself to his studies, he had no major income sources. Beyond monthly support of 10,000 pesos, about 600 tons from his mother, who passed away early in 2019. Ending that support, Leo was not known to have any employment, and his income from the church was not constant. However, the young man had made different trips to places like Miami in the United States, Aspen in Switzerland, and even the Middle East. Another curious fact was the vehicle he owned. How could it be explained that the deacon drove a new, expensive, and latest model car? He also had a state-of-the-art cell phone. Finally, there was no way to explain how Leo, a few days before his death, was able to rent a house near the parish for which he would have to pay about 6,000 pesos a month, approximately 350. In fact, the young man had invited his family to come and see the apartment, and they had planned to do so on Friday, June 14, 2019. That meeting never happened because someone took his life. Lore also noted that Leo had significant amounts of cash and money in bank accounts, with several transfers that he received from Father Francisco. The more details were revealed, the more implicated the priest seemed in everything that had happened. However, he remained firm in his position of innocence and did not provide any real information about Leo's lifestyle again and again. Father Francisco claimed that he had nothing to do with the death of the young deacon father. Hugo Vemar, former spokesman for the Archdiocese of Mexico, confirmed the same to the media after visiting Father Francisco in prison. Father Hugo condemned the actions of the authorities, accusing them of manipulating the evidence. He assured the media that despite everything, Father Francisco remained calm and that the defense lawyers would present the respective proof of the priest's innocence. Jorge Cuadra said the priest's lawyers, Jorge Cuadra and Jorge Pinuno, also asserted the priest's innocence and questioned the investigation's development. In their opinion, the videos presented, which placed him with the victim at the scene of the crime, were not sufficient to hold him responsible for taking Leo's life. Just as the ecclesiastical representatives defended the priest vehemently, the community was on the same line of action. The demonstrations of support and solidarity from Gel Hidalgo's inhabitants for Father Francisco were unwavering. From the moment they learned of the priest's detention, the community maintained a steadfast attitude over the following months. An important group within the community insisted that the authorities had made a mistake, in that Fr. Francisco could not have committed such an abominable act. The parish priest's defenders did not limit themselves to prayers or demonstrations within the church. They took their discontent to the streets, leading to several protests. Community members called for Father Francisco's release with banners, cardboard, and clothing signs displaying messages of support for the priest. They insisted on his innocence and demanded his release. A large demonstration completely shut down the southern part of the busy Inez Avenue. They also gathered at the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church, where after praying, they loudly proclaimed the priest's innocence and demanded his release from the authorities. Public, the priest is innocent, the priest is innocent journalist. This is how Cristo Salvador parishioners protested during the demonstrations in favor of the priest's release. Community members also denounced the alleged excesses committed by the media. They accused the media of spreading false information about the case and sensationalizing it. Some individuals expressed their anger by threatening to physically harm and expel journalists from the parish more than a year after the terrible attack that resulted in Leo's death. The Avendano family reported that in early December 2020, the first hearing was held in the trial court in Orient Prison. There, Father Francisco was serving preventive detention as the main suspect in killing the young man in the early morning of June 12, 2019. Both the prosecution and the defense presented data evidence and all the elements collected to be analyzed during that first hearing. During that session, the only family member who gave statements was Leo's cousin as a witness. On the other hand, some neighbors and shopkeepers near the Chistosal or parish still could not believe that such a charismatic and close priest was guilty of killing the deacon. Some locals admitted that they stepped away and stopped attending the parish after all that happened in April 2021. After evaluating all the evidence presented, the court found Father Francisco Javier Bautista Avalo guilty of the murder of young Hugo Leonardo Avendano Chavez, Leo's brother. Hose informed that the decision to declare him guilty was made collegially and that the evidence against the priest was solid from then on. It only remained to wait for the hearing to be held later. Jose Avendano said on April 9, 2021, Father Francisco was sentenced to 27 years and 6 months in prison for ending Leo's life. In addition, he was ordered to pay a sum of 422,000 pesos, about $25,000, as reparation for damages to the family members in the same sentencing hearing. It was informed that the religious man would not enjoy any benefit instead of the prison sentence because it is a case of aggravated homicide. The defenders have informed that they would appeal the court's decision, considering that they had enough arguments in favor and insisting on his innocence on social media. The priest posted that in the next few days the necessary steps for the appeal of the sentence would be taken. He asked his followers to wait for it and said that they would be informed about it. Father Francisco always maintained his innocence and swore that he was in his bedroom that night. He said he regretted Leo's death but claimed no responsibility for the event. However, the geolocation of his cell phone placed him at the place where the deacon's body was found. Not only that, both his and Leo's cell phones had the same geolocation during the whole sequence of events of that early morning. The images recorded by the security cameras added to this. And finally, he was blamed for not being able to explain why the keys to the young man's vehicle were in his possession. For believers, religious temples are a place for reflection and meditation. They are also a place to open their hearts and humbly surrender to God. However, on some occasions, as in our case today, these spaces have given rise to different situations that, far from doing good, have generated pain, sadness, and even indignation. This was another sad example of how heartbreaking it can be when a religious man gives in to temptation and allows himself to be dragged into darkness. Jose Avendano said these words that we chose for the closing were from 2019, when Jose was asking for help to clarify what happened to his brother and for those responsible to pay for what they did. Although justice was served in this case, the pain endured by the Avendano family is irreparable. Hopefully, the responsible authorities can act effectively to prevent such situations from occurring again so that cases like Leo's are never repeated. Story 2, how much hatred does it take for someone to kill an entire family, including a 4-year-old child? That was the question asked by a passerby who witnessed a crime that took place in 1998. It was a heartbreaking case that left many speechless after the perpetrator was brought to justice. I'll take you back to the years before 2000 to delve into a murder case that occurred in Jiangsu, China at 400 a.m. On February 12, 1998, the earlier weather felt particularly unique. Mrs. Zhang, 53, from Kama Village, Dantu District, Zhunjiang City, Jiangsu Province, China, woke up early as usual to prepare vegetables to sell at the market. The early morning air was refreshing, however, today, instead of the usual scent of morning dew, Mrs. Zhang smelled something burnt and smoky in the air. Puzzled, she thought, "What's burning so early in the morning?" She murmured to herself the sun had not yet risen and darkness still enveloped the village. As Mrs. Zhang stepped outside, a light caught her eye. Looking southeast, she saw a house engulfed in flames. It was the home of Xiaomayan's family. Recognizing the urgency, Mrs. Zhang didn't hesitate and shouted loudly, "Fire! There's a fire! Everyone, there's a fire!" Her cries woke the villagers, who rushed to extinguish the flames. But unfortunately, the fierce fire had already consumed the entire house by 5:40 a.m. The Dantu police arrived at the scene after being alerted by the village chief. The burned-down house belonged to 55-year-old Xiaoan. He lived with his wife Leiki. 50, their youngest daughter Xiao Qingqing. 22, their eldest daughter-in-law Wang Kuya. 29, and 2 grandchildren aged 7 and 4. Kama village had a small population with families typically living together across multiple generations, so the houses were often spaced far apart. This might explain why the fire at the Xiao family's home went unnoticed for so long. According to the surrounding villagers, when they discovered the fire, the house was already engulfed in flames throughout the ordeal. No one heard any cries for help despite the villagers' efforts to extinguish the fire. It took over an hour for the flames to subside. When the rescue team arrived, it took another 2 hours to completely extinguish the fire. Upon inspection, the police detected the smell of gasoline, indicating that this was an intentional arson. Based on the intensity of the fire and information from the villagers, the police estimated the fire was set around 3 a.m. on February 12, 1998. After the fire was extinguished, the house was reduced to ashes. The police searched through the rubble and eventually found the victims' bodies as suspected. This was a deliberate murder. The perpetrator had taken advantage of the Zhao family's resting time. With revenge being the presumed motive, the fire was so intense that the bodies were charred beyond recognition with their clothes burned off, making it impossible to identify them. There were 5 victims in total, including 4 adults and 1 child. Upon hearing this, Mrs. Zhang spoke up that must be the entire Xiaoan family, except for his daughter-in-law and grandchild. The police were surprised by Mrs. Zhang's certainty and asked her how she knew. Mrs. Zhang explained that 2 days prior, Lakey had sent her daughter-in-law Wang Kikyo back to her parents' home in front of the neighbors. Initially, it was understood that 7 people lived in the Xiao family's house, but only 5 bodies were found because 2 had left and were fortunate to survive. However, this timely departure made Wang Kikyo, the daughter-in-law, a prime suspect in the case. After investigating, the police discovered that Wang Kikyo had been living with the Zia Mayan family for 7 years. According to neighbors, her relationship with her in-laws was not very good. The reason was not her temperament, but because they believed she brought bad luck to her husband. In 1991, Wang Kikyo married Xiaoxing, the son of Xiaoan. Initially, Lakey did not approve of the relationship because Wang Kikyo was 2 years older than Xiaoxing and had been married before. However, due to her son's persistence, Lakey reluctantly agreed unexpectedly just 2 months after the wedding. Xiaoxing suffered a work-related accident and fell into a vegetative state. A few months later, he passed away due to his injuries. Seeing her son die so painfully, Lakey blamed Wang Kikyo entirely. She intended to make her life miserable, but then Wang Kikyo found out she was pregnant. Despite her anger and hatred, Lakey decided to endure the loss and take care of Wang Kikyo for the sake of the unborn child. According to neighbors, the birth of the baby was both a blessing and a curse for Wang Kikyo. The Xiao family held traditional patriarchal views, and when they found out Wang Kikyo had given birth to a daughter, they ignored and continued to mistreat her. However, they did acknowledge Xian, Wang Kikyo's daughter, as their own and supported both mother and child for 7 years. At that time, it was very difficult for a woman nearing 30, uneducated with a child and 2 failed marriages, to make a living on her own. Therefore, the fact that Wang Kikyo was allowed to stay with her in-laws was considered her good fortune for years. Wang Kikyo endured humiliation, but in return, her daughter received an education and a family. This was enough for her to continue enduring. Realizing that Wang Kikyo had a clear motive, the police traveled over 20 kilometers to Jino district to meet her. This was when Wang Kikyo learned about the incident at her in-laws' home. She was extremely distressed and worriedly asked about the family's condition. When she found out that her entire in-law family had died, Wang Kikyo collapsed, not crying or speaking, and simply invited the investigators inside. It turned out that 2 days before the fire on February 10th, Wang Kikyo and Lakey had another argument. The cause was again a children's squabble that afternoon as usual. Wang Kikyo let her daughter Esh on 7th place with her nephew Xia for the son of her sister-in-law Xiao Qingqing in the front yard. While she cooked in the kitchen, somehow Xian and Xia started fighting over a grasshopper woven from leaves. In the end, Shawan got it, making Xiao cry hearing the noise. Lakey rushed out from the living room without assessing the situation. She saw her grandson crying and immediately hit Xian hard on the bottom, causing her to cry loudly in pain. Seeing this, Wang Kikyo rushed out to stop her mother-in-law, who then accused her of not raising her child properly. She then chased both Wang Kikyo and her daughter back to her parents' home. Even though it was getting dark, this back and forth had happened multiple times over the past 7 years, knowing that her mother-in-law would soon calm down. Wang Kikyo complied that evening. She asked a villager to take her and her daughter back to her parents' home, bringing only a few clothes and some cash. Wang Kikyo firmly stated that she had been in Genko for the past 2 days. Her parents and neighbors could vouch for her. The journey from Jeno to Dan took over an hour by car. Not to mention, the police found a 20-liter plastic gasoline can discarded 20 meters from the house. If Wang Kikyo were the perpetrator, carrying a 20-liter can over such a long distance would have surely drawn attention so far. There was no concrete evidence against Wang Kikyo other than her possible motive. Returning to the crime scene once again, the police searched everywhere but found no unusual traces. All household items were burned, and valuables like gold necklaces were found intact in the house, with everything still in its place. Indicating no signs of theft as previously mentioned, the police found a plastic gasoline can suspected to be left by the perpetrator. However, fingerprint analysis yielded nothing, suggesting the perpetrator wore gloves while carrying out their plan. The forensic team had completed their autopsy reports. Examination of the victim's stomachs revealed a significant amount of sleeping pills in the adult stomachs, except for the 4-year-old child. This was a crucial clue. Why was this significant? Because a 4-year-old in a rural area would typically eat the same food as the adults. So which dish was the sleeping pill in that the child didn't eat? After collecting and organizing all clues at the scene, the police came to several conclusions. First, the motive for this crime was undoubtedly revenge. The police needed to investigate the relationships between the family members and those around them to narrow down the suspect list. Second, the perpetrator was likely someone familiar and very close to the Xiao family. It's possible that they were present at the Xiao family's dinner on the evening of February 11th, quietly adding sleeping pills to the meal before setting the house on fire. Third, another hypothesis, though speculative, was that one of the victims might have committed arson and suicide. To validate this theory, the police needed to investigate the family members' relationships. After reaching a consensus, the investigation team quickly split into 2 groups and began their inquiries. Surprisingly, after investigating the Xiao family's relationships with their neighbors, the police found that Xiao Mayan and Leiki were not well liked. Xiao Mayan was known for his erratic temper, always thinking he was right, being domineering and never getting along with anyone. He met his wife Leiki was equally problematic, being aggressive, gossipy, and frequently speaking ill of her daughters. In-law and sons-in-law, their selfish behavior had caused numerous conflicts with neighbors, notably with Song Shin 52. Song Shin, a longtime neighbor, had turned from friend to foe over a dispute involving a cow eating Zhao's corn. According to neighbors, this incident happened over a year ago. Zhao, without informing Song Jin, killed the cow and hosted a feast for the neighbors. When Song Shin discovered what happened, Jian not only refused to apologize, but also lectured him on being considerate and warned that this was just a threat. If Song Shin didn't keep his animals in check, he wouldn't let it slide. Next time, the value of a cow to a farmer is significant, and losing it along with the insult from Xiao Mayan made Song Shin furious. A few days later, he retaliated by throwing cow dung into Xiao Mayan's house. This led to another fierce argument, to the point where the village chief had to personally fund a tall fence to separate the 2 households for over a year. The 2 sides clashed frequently. If they went arguing, they were fighting. The village chief was so exasperated that he eventually pretended not to notice their conflicts. Given this history, the police couldn't overlook Song Shin when approached. Song Shin sighed and said, "I knew you'd suspect my family because we have the biggest grudge against him, but I swear I didn't do it. I genuinely hate the old man, but I wouldn't kill his entire family. Besides, how could I harm a 4-year-old child?" Indeed, this tragedy was incredibly sorrowful. A family of 5, including a 4-year-old child, was burned to death. Who could harbor such intense hatred against the Xiao family to commit such a heinous act? After verifying Song Sain's whereabouts and activities, the police temporarily ruled him out as a suspect. On that evening, it was confirmed that he was at home after work with some distant relatives. Visiting, however, from Songshin, the police learned new information about the relationship between the Xiao Mayan family and their son-in-law, Ling Shisha, 25, who was Xiao Qing's husband and one of the 5 victims of the fire. Considering the second and third hypotheses from the police, Ling Shishio might be involved in the incident. Ling Xia was known to have the least influence in the family, even less than Wang Qia. This was because he was living with his in-laws. Ling Jia married Xiao Qing when she turned 18 because she was pregnant. Ling Jia had been frail since childhood and wasn't as strong as other men in the village, so his job was much lighter and his salary was equivalent to that of women. This inadequacy made Ling Xia despised by his in-laws, especially Zhaowen during meals. Zhaowen and his wife Lakey often made disparaging remarks toward their son-in-law. Even Xiao Qingqing disrespected her husband and agreed with her parents. Gradually, Ling Shish lived like an invisible person in the house. He had no say in anything and had to seek his wife's permission for everything to avoid his in-laws. Ling Shisha worked outside all day and only returned home after dark. The only person who treated him with respect was his sister-in-law, Wang Qia. Perhaps because their fates in the Xiao household were similar, they empathized with each other, seeing her husband becoming closer to her sister-in-law. Xiao Qingqing grew visibly upset. She urged her mother to discipline Wang Qia while she scolded her husband, demanding that he maintained proper boundaries. Although they were no longer outwardly close, they still quietly supported and helped each other. When the police asked about her relationship with Ling Xia, Wang Kachia insisted that aside from mutual empathy, there were no other feelings involved. Based on these details, the police formed a hypothesis. Ling Shisha felt humiliated and disrespected by his in-laws, which led him to plan the arson to kill the family and then himself. However, he didn't want to implicate his sister-in-law, the only person who treated him with respect. So he waited until she and her daughter left the house to execute his plan. Ling Shisha had both the motive and the opportunity. He could have spiked the food with sleeping pills when no one was watching after everyone fell asleep. He set the house on fire, then took the pills and lay in the flames with them. Although this hypothesis aligned with the clues the police had gathered, they couldn't understand why he would choose to kill his own son. Ling Shisha was known to be very loving towards his son and didn't have a malicious or scheming nature. Even if he disliked his in-laws, the idea of harming his 4-year-old son was hard to accept at this point. Lun 28th informed the police that he had seen Ling Shisha outside his house at around 1 a.m. Lun, a long-distance truck driver, was returning home on his motorcycle after work and passed by Zhuan's house. At that time, there was no sign of fire, but he saw Ling Shishio standing outside. Len thought Ling Shishio was just out for a midnight bathroom break and didn't pay much attention, quickly heading home to rest. If this sighting was accurate, it further implicated Ling Shishi as a suspect. Typically, those who grew up in rural areas understand that people in rural China often have early dinners around 6 to 7 p.m., sometimes even earlier, and go to bed between 8 and 10 p.m. If the perpetrator drugged the victims and they followed this routine, the effects of the sleeping pills would still be active by 1 to 2 a.m. Ling Shisha being awake and outside at this hour was suspicious. Suggesting he hadn't taken the pills, this observation lent credibility to the police's hypothesis. Finally, after many days of investigation, the police decided to close the case. The perpetrator was concluded to be Ling Shisha. With the motive being revenge for the disdain from his in-laws, it seemed the case could finally be put to rest. But some investigators disagreed with this conclusion. They believed the evidence was insufficient, and given that they couldn't get a statement from this particular suspect, they decided to continue monitoring the case for a while. On February 24th, the police returned to the scene with sniffer dogs, hoping to find any overlooked clues in the rubble. However, despite their efforts, they found nothing but ashes and charred metal. At that moment, Mrs. Zhang, who had discovered the fire, saw them and spoke up, still investigating. "I thought the case was closed. You guys are really diligent. If you need any help, just let us know. Everyone's been working hard." Searching these past few days, the police were surprised by Mrs. Zhang's comment because they had just returned to the scene today. Who else had been there? Investigating, they asked Mrs. Zhang about this, and she revealed that Wang Qia had been coming to the site repeatedly over the past 2 days. The case was nearly 2 weeks old by then, with the investigation mostly concluded. So why was Wang Kacha returning? Was she hiding something from the police? This prompted a discreet investigation into Wang Kia. Initially, the police believed it would be difficult for Wang Kia to act. Given the 20-kilometer distance between Jano and Dantu, she couldn't ride a motorcycle cycle, and traveling with a 20-liter gasoline can would certainly draw attention if she were with someone else. Yet her recent behavior raised the police's suspicions once more. In an unexpected turn during their quiet investigation, they found a witness indicating that Wang Kachia had indeed left Genko late on February 11th. Mr. Z41, a fellow villager of Wang Kiko's family, reported that around 1 a.m. on February 12th, he saw a woman on a motorcycle leaving the village. Her build and clothing closely resembled Wang Kikyo. He knew she couldn't ride a motorcycle, so he thought he might have been mistaken, especially since it was dark, and he was a bit tipsy to verify the police visited Wang Kiko's home and saw her father's motorcycle matched. Mr. X's description, it was clear that her family knew something. Using their professional experience, the investigators posed some indirect questions, making Wang Kiko's parents avoid eye contact. The police's suspicions grew stronger. They decided to confront Wang Kia directly, to their astonishment upon meeting them. Wang Kia immediately confessed to the crime, however. When she explained her motive, the police were left speechless. Unsure how to respond, according to Wang Kia, after she gave birth to Xia Huan, her in-laws increasingly mistreated her. They didn't treat her as they claimed to others. Her mother-in-law, Aliki, forced her to go out to work just 3 days after giving birth. The lack of nutritious food meant she had no milk for her baby. When she asked to borrow milk from the neighbors, Liki slapped her, calling her useless and irresponsible as a mother. She also refused to let her borrow milk. Fearing it would tarnish their reputation during that time, her daughter could only drink rice water. Sometimes Wang Kachia managed to secretly get some milk from other neighbors. Later, when her sister-in-law got married, Xiaoan and his wife took all the money Wang Kia had saved for her daughter to give to Xiao Qingqing. They treated her like a servant. She had to wake up first to prepare breakfast, then work in the fields at noon. She had to rush back to cook for her father-in-law and then return to the fields in the afternoon. At night, she was the last to sleep after finishing all the chores. Wang Kachia tried to endure this for her daughter's sake, but Xiao Mayan wouldn't leave her in peace. In July 1995, she vividly remembered coming home at noon to prepare lunch for her father-in-law. Her daughter had just eaten and gone to sleep, and everyone else was out. She and Xiao Mayan were the only ones at home after finishing lunch. Wang Kia went to the bathroom to wash off the morning sweat and grime. She suddenly felt like someone was watching her. She turned to see Xiao Mayan staring at her with a predatory look. When he saw her notice him, he brazenly opened the bathroom door and stepped in with a satisfied look. Wang Kiao, terrified, clutched herself and begged him to leave, but he ignored her, saying that since his son couldn't enjoy her, he would take his place. His disgusting words and actions left her paralyzed with fear. That afternoon, she became prey to her vile father-in-law. Once it happened, it kept happening. Whenever Xiao Mayan had the urge or opportunity, he assaulted Wang Kia. Even worse, this happened so frequently that both Lakey and Xiao Qingqing caught them in the ACT, but they said nothing. Lakey believed Wang Kachia seduced her husband. Intensifying her hatred, she poured hot water on her leaving scars and put nails in her shoes. Despite knowing everything her mother-in-law did, Wang Kia couldn't resist living in the same house her sister-in-law Xiao Qingqing also despised her, often making things difficult, cutting her long hair to sell for money, and beating her daughter whenever she made her son cry many times. Wang Kachia wanted to end her life or leave, but she had nowhere to go, and worried about her daughter's future, she felt she had to stay. But her endurance became a curse for her daughter. During the Lunar New Year in 1998, an unforgivable incident happened on the 30th night. Wang Kachia had to brave the cold to buy fireworks and supplies for the holiday. When she returned, she heard her daughter screaming. She dropped everything and ran to her room to find her father-in-law on top of her daughter. Xian was crying for her mother, her clothes torn, begging her grandfather to stop. Wang Kachou couldn't contain herself and pushed Xiao Mayan off drunk. He tried to attack her, hearing the commotion. Lakey rushed in and slapped Wang Kia, demanding she apologize to her father-in-law, which she refused. It was clear that Lakey knew what had happened but chose to protect her husband. Meanwhile, Xiao Qingqing forced her husband Ling Shersha to stay in their room and not help seeing the hypocritical faces of her in-laws and her daughter crying in pain. Wang Kia couldn't bear it any longer. She took her daughter and walked over 20 km in the cold to her parents' house to avoid any rumors that might tarnish. Their reputation Lakey went to Wang Kiko's parents' house the next morning using sweet words and threats to bring Wang Kia and her daughter back because her daughter was about to start school and needed paperwork. Wang Kachia reluctantly returned, but she didn't expect that just a month later the same thing would happen again. This time Wang Kachia couldn't take it anymore. She vowed to make the Xiao family pay for everything she had endured over the past years. Thus, Wang Kachia started planning to kill her in-laws from February 2nd. Each day, she bought a little gasoline from the store and poured it into a case she had prepared and hidden in the kitchen. She knew no one in her in-laws' family ever bothered to clean the kitchen, so she wasn't afraid of being discovered. During this time, she secretly learned to ride a motorcycle, which later became her alibi. By February 10th, she started picking fights with her mother-in-law, getting herself sent back to her parents' house. This way, she could safely take her daughter and establish a perfect alibi. Early on February 11th, she returned to her in-laws' house. Familiar with the place sneaking in was easy. She knew the family had a habit of drinking ginger tea every evening, so she mixed sleeping pills into the tea and sugar jars. However, Ling Jia caught her sneaking around in the kitchen. Wang Kia didn't hide her plan from him, telling him she would set the house on fire the next night and advised him not to drink the tea. She told him to take his son and leave the house. By that time the next day, Wang Kachia returned as she had planned. As for Ling Xia, he probably didn't drink the tea with the family that night. However, as he neared death, he chose to stay with his wife and child in the house. He despised by drinking the tea with the sleeping pills. When Wang Kachia arrived, she thought Ling Xia had left as instructed, so she set the fire. It wasn't until she first spoke with the police that she learned Ling Xia had chosen to stay in the flames with his in-laws. Perhaps when Wang Kachia bowed her head in sadness, it wasn't out of remorse or to deceive the police, but because she was contemplating why Ling Xixio made such a choice. In the end, the case was resolved. Wang Kia showed no remorse in court. Her regret was not giving her daughter a happy life and failing to protect her. All those years before her execution, Wang Kachia asked her parents to take care of her daughter. She also told her daughter, no matter what, never to live a life like hers. Wang Kiko's words moved many people. Everyone wants to be a good role model for their children. But what kind of terrible life did this mother endure to beg her daughter not to live as she did? This case has much to discuss, but it's hard to criticize any one individual because everyone involved had their faults. Despite the wrong actions of the perpetrator as a mother, it's hard to imagine anyone enduring what she and her child went through. Story 3 in early 2013, a murder case in the Bali district of Taiwan shocked the media and public for an extended period. The incident not only drew attention because of the brutal nature of the crime, but also because the victim was an elderly billionaire family. You may have heard of this case before or are just now learning about it, but what are the details of the case? Who is the perpetrator? What was their motive on February 26th, 2013? A woman named Imo Yoon was walking along the Tisui River area when she stumbled upon a strange object lying near the edge of the mangrove forest. Due to her poor eyesight in the distance, she couldn't clearly see what the object was, only that it was quite large. Curious, she decided to get closer as she approached. She kept rubbing her eyes to get a clearer view of the object below the bank. Only when she got a clear look did she fall back in shock and scream. Drawing the attention of those nearby, a man quickly ran towards the sound of the scream. Imo Yun, trembling, pointed towards the distance and shakily said, "There's a body over there," understanding the situation. The man quickly called the police and asked others to calm the woman. Within 10 minutes, the police arrived and secured the scene upon seeing the body. One officer exclaimed, "Isn't this Mr. Chin and Fu who was reported missing a few days ago?" The whole team was stunned because just a few days earlier, the victim's family had reported him missing. The police had not found any information yet, and now received news of his death. Despite the body being swollen, the facial features were still recognizable. The police then called Mr. Chen's family to inform them a preliminary investigation revealed that the victim was found at the edge of the mangrove forest. Beside the Tisui River nearby was a trail where locals often walked or biked. It was possible that the victim had an accident and fell into the Tisui River with the body drifting to the shore as the tide receded, exposing it on the mangrove forest floor. At first glance, the police noticed Mr. Chen's body was swollen with many injuries on his body and neck. However, it was difficult to determine with the naked eye whether the injuries were caused by a weapon or environmental factors. The Tisui River had many sharp rocks beneath its surface, and the mangrove shore had many protruding roots, which could have caused these injuries as the body drifted. Additionally, since the body had been in the water for some time, the wounds were severely decomposed, making it hard to assess them visually after examining the body. The police noted that the victim's clothes were still relatively new and neatly dressed, suggesting he was on his way to an important event before his death. The victim was not carrying many valuables, still wearing a gold-plated watch on his wrist, and his shoes were still on, making it unlikely he was attacked for money, but rather suggesting an accident. The police also divided themselves to search the area under the river and near the shore, but did not find anything else. More and more local residents gathered around, which somewhat hindered the police's search process. From all the information gathered so far, the police could initially conclude that Mr. Chen and Fu had fallen into the water after slipping on the easily slippery terrain after bringing the body back to the examination department. Mr. Chen's family quickly arrived upon seeing the police. They immediately asked about the whereabouts of Mrs. Jean Kaping, Mr. Chen Jin Fu's wife. It turned out that besides Mr. Chen, his wife had also gone missing from the evening of February 16th. At this time, the investigation team was questioning local residents when they received unexpected information on the night of February 25th, the one day before Mr. Chin Jinu's body was found. A witness reported seeing two people burning paper money by the Tisui River. However, since burning Joe's paper for the deceased is not unusual in Taiwan, the witness did not approach them and went straight home. The police immediately sought information about these two strange individuals by checking the surrounding area's cameras. However, because it was dark in the mangrove area along the river lake, surveillance cameras and the residential area cameras did not cover that direction. No information could be found. Despite this, the police remained determined to search by asking local residents if they had seen anyone suspicious that night. In addition to investigating Chen Jinu's death, the police were under pressure to find John Kaping. Until now, they still did not know whether John Kaping was alive or not. Therefore, they divided the investigation team into two smaller groups, one to search for information about John Kaping and the other to continue investigating Mr. Chen's case. The next day, the police received information that a woman tried to withdraw money from Jean King's bank account at a bank in Zhangga County, but failed due to incorrect password entry. She then attempted to withdraw money at the counter, but was refused by the staff, as she appeared much younger than the profile information. At this point, two opinions began to form within the investigation team. Some suspected that John Kaping could be the mastermind, having dealt with her husband and then sent someone disguised as herself to withdraw money to mislead the police. Others believed that both victims were murdered, with the motive likely being to seize their assets. This latter motive was widely supported, including by the victim's family. Do you know why most people agreed with the second theory? Let's take a break from the investigation to learn about the background of Mr. Chen Fu and his wife. After hearing this, you might guess something. Mr. Chen Fu, born in 1934, was a wealthy businessman who once taught at Takshoku University in Japan. He owned two uninhabited islands in Okinawa, Japan, and numerous properties worth tens of millions of Taiwanese dollars. His wife, Mrs. Jean Kaping, born in 1956, was an associate professor at Churchin University, owning jewelry worth 40 million Taiwanese dollars, equivalent to 1.2 million US. The couple currently lived in a villa in Bali District, New Taipei City, regarding family matters. Mr. Chin and Fu and his wife had no children, but their relatives and nieces and nephews were very attentive to them. The couple, being elderly, would spend their time traveling together, visiting nearby coffee shops, or attending various parties. Besides their work, this shows that there was no conceivable reason for Zhang Keping to harm Mr. Chin since February 27th, when the mysterious woman attempted to withdraw money using Zhang King's bank card. The police divided into smaller groups to investigate the surrounding area's cameras, but still found no leads. However, the team investigating the social relationships of the couple received new information from a distant relative of Mr. Chin. It was revealed that after accumulating a massive fortune, Mr. Chin decided to retire, sell his stores and house in Japan, and live a secluded life with his wife in a small villa by the Tamsui River in Bali District, Taiwan. This area is also where the two victims' bodies were discovered. The relative noted that the couple frequently visited a nearby coffee shop for drinks, mainly because it was the only coffee shop in the area. This person also mentioned that Mr. Chun had shared that the couple had long adopted a girl who worked at this coffee shop. Armed with this crucial information, the police immediately visited the mentioned coffee shop. The coffee shop named Momo. Coffee was located below Mr. Chen Jinu's villa, only about 130 meters from where Mr. Chen's body was found. The first person the police met was the store manager Chihan, born in 1985. Mrs. Ihan explained that Mr. Chun had been a regular customer since 2009, often visiting with his wife, the girl. The couple adopted was her Ehan. Then sat down and recounted the details to the police. She said she started working there in late September 2008. In 2009, she met Mr. Chin and John Guing. As they were regular customers, Ehan often chatted with them. One day they asked about her family. Mr. Chin learned that she was under significant financial pressure due to her father's early death, her sister studying abroad, and her mother working alone in Cam. Because of this, he offered to adopt Ehan as his daughter from 2010. Mr. Chin regularly provided financial support, gave jewelry to Ehan, and guided her in stock investments, making her very grateful to the couple. The last time the couple visited the coffee shop was on February 16th. Ehan said she found it odd that Mr. Chun hadn't visited the shop for several days afterward, assuming they were traveling. She didn't want to bother them at home recently. Ehan had been busy preparing for her wedding, so she didn't have time to call the couple. The police also inquired about other relationships Mr. Chin Jin Fu might have had, and the coffee shop employees. They asked if anyone else was close to the couple. Jihan responded that because most employees were new, few were familiar with Mr. Chin. The people who knew and frequently talked with the victims were Lu Binging, the owner of Momo Coffee, and two shareholders, Oi Ching and Ding. However, compared to the others, owner Lu Binghang was closer to Mr. Chin. Immediately, Lu Binghang was summoned by the police for questioning upon seeing the police. Mr. Binging said, "If you want information about Mr. Chin Jinfu and his wife, you should ask Jerhan. She knows more." It seemed that the relationship between Jerhan and the couple was very close to the point of causing jealousy among others. The police then interviewed every employee at the coffee shop, but failed to obtain any useful information. At this point, an officer stepping outside noticed a camera that could capture the entrance to the coffee shop. The police quickly contacted the camera's owner and requested the footage. On February 16th, the footage showed Mr. Chin Jin Fu and his wife indeed visiting Momo Coffee. However, there was no footage of them leaving the police. Then questioned the employees present at the coffee shop that day, including Jian's fiancée Zhu Ayang and other acquaintances of the couple. But all they received were responses like, "I don't know, some said they had to leave early. Others said they were too busy to notice when Mr. Chun and Jan Gui Ping left the shop. This only heightened the suspicions about those present to avoid alerting the suspects." The police began quietly monitoring and observing all employees at Momo Coffee. However, they overlooked one factor. The media was also very interested in this case. The media continuously approached and tried to extract information from the suspects. You might be curious about Jean Ging's whereabouts by now, right? Is Jean Guing still alive? Where was she? While news of her husband's death was everywhere, these questions were also troubling the investigation team at that time on March 2nd. as the police continued their investigation along the Tisui River. The unanswered questions finally found answers while the search team scoured the river area and the mangrove forest edge. An officer searching the swampy area near the bike path on the left bank of the Tisui River unexpectedly discovered a woman's body. The police quickly gathered at the scene. Even before anyone could check, it seemed everyone already knew the answer. Soon after, the forensic doctors confirmed that the body was indeed J.N. Guing. On the same day, the police received a report from Shuren University that a female student had found John Ging's wallet in the women's restroom at the university. Unfortunately for the perpetrator, their attempt to mislead the police had failed. At this point, the employees at Momo Coffee remained the suspects. There were a total of 11 people, including 6. Store employees and Eon's boyfriend, the store owner, and 2 shareholders had also been interrogated on March 3rd. The police searched the store and found 3 drops of blood in the kitchen. It was noted that J.N. Ging's body had 2 stab wounds on the neck, leading the investigation team to believe the case was far from simple. After the autopsy on March 4th, forensic experts determined that the couple had died after falling into the water and had puncture wounds in their chests. Jean Guing had several 6-centimeter deep stab wounds in her back and a 6-centimeter deep wound in her lung. There were also 2 open wounds on her neck. Thus, the injuries on Mr. Chun, initially thought to be caused by underwater objects, were likely inflicted by the perpetrator. Additionally, forensic examination found a residual amount of anesthetic in the stomachs of both victims, indicating they had been drugged and then attacked while incapacitating before being dumped into the Tisui River. However, the police still could not identify the perpetrator. The only certainty was that the culprit was among the 11 people at Momo Coffee to avoid any investigative misdirection. The police continually questioned and examined the recent activities of each individual. First was the adopted daughter John, as initially stated to the police. Ahan and her fiancé Zhu Ang were planning their wedding. Ahan had been financially supported by the Chin couple for over 3 years. Despite the assistance, she did not take it for granted and worked hard, earning Mr. Chen's increasing affection given her imminent wedding. It was hard to believe she had the motive to commit murder. Furthermore, during questioning, Ihan remained calm and provided detailed answers to the police's questions. She supplied extensive information and expressed her desire for the police to quickly find the murderer of her foster parents. The second group of suspects were the store owner Lu Binghang and the 2 shareholders, Ashi Chung and Zhong Ganen. During questioning, Jian provided the police with a suspicious detail the 3 were planning to invest in a new store. Despite Momo Coffee's thriving business, after hearing the police's suspicions, Lu Binjing admitted that he had asked to borrow money from Mr. Qin Jinfu. However, since it was a significant amount, Mr. Qin initially refused, but mentioned he would reconsider. Additionally, on the day Mr. and Mrs. Chun went missing, all 3 individual UAL had alis. The remaining coffee shop employees were also questioned by the police, but since they were not close to the victims, no useful information could be obtained without any solid evidence. The police could not detain them and eventually had to release everyone under the investigator supervision. As mentioned earlier, this case also attracted significant media attention. Even before the police could investigate further, the media had caught wind of the case. They conducted interviews in and around the COF shop. Reporters asked questions to the store manager Jan, who calmly responded. A reporter asked, "What did they usually do when they came here?" Ahan replied, "Just drink coffee and walk by the river." The reporter continued, "Did they have any arguments when they left that day?" Ahan answered, "No, they didn't. As you can see, cases involving media attention often create additional pressure on the police investigation." Right, given the timeline's complexity, I'll summarize the key events again to avoid confusion. On the evening of February 16th, 2013, Qin Jinfu and Jan Guiping went to Momo Coffee in Bali for drinks and then disappeared on February 20th. Their family reported them missing to the police on the night of February 25th, the day before Qin Jinu's body was discovered. Witnesses reported seeing 2 people burning Joe's paper by the Tisui River on February 26th. The wealthy businessman Qin Jinu's body was found by the Tisui River in Bali, 130 meters from the coffee shop. Initially, the police concluded he had fallen into the water after slipping on February 27th, after the incident with Mr. Chin Jin-fu. A woman impersonating Zhang Guing attempted to withdraw money using her bank card at Jenga Bank, but failed. Due to incorrect password entry on March 2nd, Zhang Ging's body was found by the Tamsu River in Bali District, New Taipei City. That same day, her wallet was discovered in the women's restroom at Shorin University. The police then determined that the perpetrator was deliberately trying to mislead the investigation. On March 3rd, the police searched Momo Coffee and found 3 drops of blood in the store's kitchen without lab results. They couldn't determine who the blood belonged to. On March 4th, the prosecutors conducted autopsies and discovered deep wounds on the neck and chest. There were no signs of water in the victims' airways, indicating they had died before being thrown into the river. So far, the police poly have narrowed down the suspects but lack conclusive evidence. Who do you think the perpetrator could be? Tsihan, her boyfriend, Jae Yifang Lu, Binjing Orning Yong Yening, or one of the 6 employees who the police least suspect at around 4 a.m.? On March 6th, the reporter from Liberty Times visited the coffee shop for an interview and happened to see Oh Shoring and John Guffin cleaning up the baking room and storage late at night. Curious, the reporter approached them, but they only said they were cleaning up trash later that day. A bank employee from Janga County went to the police station and said that the woman suspected by the media looked very similar to the woman who tried to withdraw money. The previous day, the police quickly showed her photos of the female employees at the coffee shop. She immediately pointed to a picture of a young woman. It was none other than Sean, combining the bank employee's information and the reporter's account. The police were certain that Sihan was the perpetrator and suspected Yoring and Yong Yening of colluding to destroy evidence. On the afternoon of March 6th, the police arrived at the coffee shop to arrest Sihan. Despite the police's suspicions and evidence, Sihan insisted she had nothing to do with the case. She repeatedly expressed her gratitude towards Mr. Chin Fu and his wife, and maintained that she had no motive to harm them. Seeing their trusted manager being arrested for questioning owner Lu Binghong, who was auditing accounts at the time, found it hard to believe he doubted the police lead and remarked to his wife, "Could this be a mistake?" Little did he know he would soon find himself caught in the storm. As well, at the police station, Sian steadfastly denied the charges. The police, unconvinced by her strong defense, showed her the autopsy photos of the victims. The sight of the photos broke her composure. She vomited, cried, and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." After calming down, Sihan confessed everything. She admitted that Mr. Chin frequently visited the coffee shop and intended to adopt her. Recently, Lu Binghong faced financial difficulties, and knowing the Chin couple's wealth conspired with shareholders Oring and Zhang Yening to commit the crime. Ahan confessed that Lu Bingjing was the mastermind, and she agreed to the plan for a large sum of money, aware that John Geiping always carried bank cards, savings books, and seals. Ahan lured the Chin couple to the shop on the night of February 16th. She spiked their drinks with a set of, and as Jean Guing was about to lose, consciousness forced her into a car to demand her bank card's PIN. When Jean Guing resisted, Aihan killed her Lu Bingjing, and the others then took the bodies to Yongding's rented house after the family reported the couple missing, and the police began searching. The 4 conspirators decided to dispose of the bodies by dumping them along the riverbank about 30 miles from the coffee shop on February 26th and March 2nd, 2013 at 4 a.m. On March 7th, just after El Bingjing finished auditing the books and opened the store, he was greeted by a barrage of flashing lights. Reporters repeatedly asked, "Why did you kill Chin Fu and his wife?" Shortly afterward, Lu Binghong was taken away by the police. He entered the police station without knowing what lay ahead. Lu Binghong greeted the shareholders, who were also in custody, only to be scolded by the police for potentially conspiring to confess the police, then arranged for Binghong to meet directly with Sihan, but she could not bring herself to look him in the eye. Outside the police station, the front page of that day's newspaper was filled with news of Sian's confession. She claimed that the death of Mr. and Mrs. Chin Jin-fu was due to the owner's greed, while she admitted to committing murder. She insisted she was merely a pawn. There was also information suggesting that, feeling guilty, Sian had gone to the riverbank to burn something for the deceased. Do you remember that a day before Mr. Chen's body was found, someone was seen burning Joe's paper when the police visited the Joe's paper shop? Mentioned in Sean's confession, the shop owner confirmed her statement, adding that a man accompanied Sean that day, and that man was L-binging. The witness testimonies were quickly verified. Additionally, on that day, Lu Binghang and the other two had their mobile phones turned off for an extended period. Both the police and the media believed Sean's story, thinking it unlikely that a liker could have overpowered two people as simultaneously, as there was no direct evidence the Taiwanese media fueled the fire, portraying the three owners as the main culprits. Suddenly, Lu Binghang and his family were left in shock, going from cooperating with the investigation to becoming prime suspects. You must understand that the accusations against Lu Bingjing, Zhang Yanning, and A.O. Shoring were solely based on Xian's testimony with no concrete evidence to find proof. The police searched for surveillance cameras around the area. However, no surveillance footage showed Lu Binghang and the others burning Zhao's paper, nor were there any traces of weapons or blood-stained clothing found in or around the coffee shop. Unexpectedly, the very next day, Xihan retracted her confession, claiming her initial statement was false and that the police had forced her to confess at that moment. Lu Binghang and the other two were released on bail and soon regained their freedom. Upon returning home, Lu Binghang still felt like a sudden suspect. He used the coffee shop's social media account to explain the situation, only to receive thousands of abusive comments from Neens to prove his innocence. As soon as possible, Lu Binghang decided not to wait for the police to verify the facts. He retrieved the surveillance footage from the coffee shop to uncover the truth. Upon reviewing the footage, they indeed saw Xihan meeting the two victims that night. After returning to the shop, Lu Binghang also found a necklace and a pearl ring in Xian's desk. He immediately took pictures and sent them to Zheng Xing's family, who confirmed that the jewelry belonged to the victim on April 2nd. Lu Binghang submitted the information he had gathered to the police, and finally the three of them were cleared from the list of suspects. As for Sean, she was prosecuted on April 12th on 5 criminal charges: robbery and murder, fraudulent appropriation of property theft causing injury, and perjury, after failing to pin the blame on the three men. Ahan continued to change her statements in her third account. Ahan claimed that Miss Chin offered her 6 million Taiwanese dollars, equivalent to $185,000, and a house to kill his wife. Then she said she was in a romantic relationship with him and he wanted to kill his wife, so he asked for her help. She initially only wanted to rob Jiang Tuing, but was incited by Mr. Chun to commit murder. Finally, Ahan claimed she wanted to escape Mr. Chen's harassment and marry her boyfriend, so she pretended to cooperate with him to kill his wife, and then planned to kill both of them. Xian began to detail her relationship with the victim. She said that Qin and Fu did not use a mobile phone, but only a landline. When he wanted to meet her, he would either speak to her directly or visit the store. They arranged to meet at 1 or 2 in the morning, and later even earlier after waiting for his wife to fall asleep. Qin Jinfu would go to meet Ahan. She had to lie to her boyfriend, saying she needed to sleep early. Ahan stated that after each encounter, Qin Jinfu would give her red envelopes containing tens of thousands of Taiwanese dollars. Additionally, he gave her jewelry such as jade pendants or pearl necklaces. CIA Ahan said that as she prepared to marry her boyfriend, she decided to end her illicit relationship with Qin Jinu and told Jiang Tuing about it. However, Jiang Tuing seemed indifferent to the news. After that, Qin Jinfu said he had a poor relationship with his wife Jiang Tuing and wanted to regain financial control of the family. Some time ago, Mr. Qin asked her to kill Jiang Zaping, promising, "I will buy a house and give you 6 million Taiwanese dollars in cash." Xian continued, saying that neither her mother nor her boyfriend knew about her with Mr. Qin. She wanted to end it. But Jiang Tuing was indifferent. Moreover, if she only killed Mr. Qin, Jiang Tuing would know she was the culprit. So Ahan's plan was to kill both of them. Ahan emphasized that she chose the stupidest way to resolve the situation, to sever the inappropriate relationship between her and Mr. Qin. The prosecution later confirmed that Ahan and Mr. Chun had a close relationship, but found no evidence of a romantic affair. After all her false statements, Sean finally confessed to the crime. The story began in October 2012. One day in October, Kahan went to a pharmacy below her apartment and said that her mother had passed away. She did not get along with her stepfather. They often argued, and she was so distressed that she couldn't sleep. She was prescribed sleeping pills. Han returned to the pharmacy a second time and was given 21 sleeping pills. Besides the sleeping pills, after learning that Zhang Tuing stored jewelry worth 40 million Taiwanese dollars in a safe deposit box at the new Taipei City Farmers Association, CIAN rented a safe deposit box from the association just to see what the key looked like a week before the crime. Cian visited Qin Jinu's house and tested the effects of the sleeping pills on him. She gave Mr. Qin water with sleeping pills and waited for him to fall asleep before searching for Zhang Tuing's safe deposit box. But her search was unsuccessful. Sean had no choice but to leave Mr. Chen's house in early February 2013. Unable to find the safe deposit box key, Cian signed up for Zhang Xing's yoga class and adjusted her schedule to avoid clashing with Zhang Tuing's class. This made it easier for her to search Zhang Tuing's bag for the safe deposit key, as she hoped Han succeeded. This time she obtained the key to the Farmers Association's safe deposit center, but the transaction officer refused to open the box without proper identification on February 16th. After several failed attempts to rob the Qin couple, Han decided to see it through to the end. On that day, she invited Mr. and Mrs. Qin Jinu to the coffee shop to celebrate El Binghing's youngest son's first birthday. At 7:15 p.m. that evening, the Qin couple arrived to find no preparations for a birthday party. Upon asking the owner, they learned the party was scheduled for the following week to apologize. Lu Bingheng offered them 2 cans of homemade beer and excused himself. Han also served them drinks and invited the couple to sit down by 7:30 p.m. Zhang Tuing began to feel dizzy. Mr. Chun, noticing his wife's condition, asked Dean to help take her home to rest at 8:30 p.m. Mr. Chinnen seemed overly intoxicated, and Han again helped him leave the coffee shop both times. Han took them out through the back door so the police did not see the couple leaving the coffee shop on the front cameras instead of taking them home. She led them to the mangrove forest by the Tasui River as the tide was about to rise. Han initially planned to leave the unconscious couple by the riverbank before the tide came in, allowing the rising water to drown them and make it look like they had fallen into the river. Unexpectedly, Qin and Fu woke up early due to an insufficient dose of sleeping pills and weakly asked what Han was doing. Realizing her plan was exposed, Han grabbed a fruit knife she had prepared and attacked Mr. Qin multiple times, covering his mouth to prevent him from screaming after Mr. Qin died. Han turned to Zhang Tu, waping with the knife, using the same method to stab her in the neck and chest until she stopped breathing. Han then dragged both bodies to the river, allowing the rising tide to submerge them before leaving the scene with Zhang Tu, wallet covered in mud and blood. She changed into a spare set of clothes she had prepared in the staff room. When the staff on duty arrived, she explained, "I accidentally fell into the river while dumping coffee grounds the next day." Jihan, eager to complete the plan, wore a wig dressed in Zhang Xing's clothes and applied makeup to look older. She took Zhang Tuing's bank card and ID to the counter to withdraw money, stealing 350,000 Taiwanese dollars, equivalent to over 10 million. Once the real perpetrator was identified, reconstructing the case became straightforward. Many witnesses, including Eon's yoga instructor, the taxi driver who took her to the bank, and the bank clerk who handled the transaction, provided a complete chain of evidence. Since her arrest in March 2013, Jihan had given 4 different confessions. Initially, she blamed the owners, claiming she was merely following orders. Then she stated that neither she nor the owners were involved and that the police coerced her into giving a false confession. On April 15th, she changed her story again, saying Mr. Qin wanted to kill Yang Tuing, and she killed both of them to escape her illicit relationship with him. Finally, at her trial on May 21st, she changed her testimony once more, claiming she acted alone but indeed had a romantic relationship with Qin and Fu to prove their closeness. She described physical features of Qin Jinfu, such as freckles on his back and arms, white hair, and a scar on his thigh. However, the report showed Qin and Fu had no such scars as for the freckles. They are common in older adults and could not be used as evidence of a close relationship. In the end, Jihan's confession was deemed baseless and unreliable. In October 2013, John was sentenced to death for robbery and murder upon hearing the word death from the judge Jihan. Initially, Calm broke down crying, saying she did not expect such a severe punishment. She said, "If there is a hell, I am willing to go there to atone for my sins." So the case concluded with the real perpetrator facing appropriate punishment. However, rumors and debates about the suspects persisted. Some even believed Jihan's boyfriend was involved over time. These controversies faded and the case gradually disappeared from public attention. Story 4: People are not born evil. Whether someone turns out good or bad largely depends on how they manage their own ego. Additionally, it is influenced by the surrounding environment. Many individuals are inherently good but may find themselves in trouble due to a moment of impulsiveness or lack of thought, leading to irreversible mistakes at around 7 a.m. On May 2, 2011, Mrs. Chung, the mother of Xu Zong, the local tax bureau chief of District 8 in Hao City, Guangxi Province, China, went to invite her son's family to a wedding banquet at a restaurant upon arrival. Mrs. Chung stood outside ringing the doorbell for a long time, but no one answered. She then called her son Zhuang, but although there was no response, she tried calling the landline, but again, no one answered. Mrs. Chung assumed that the family had stayed up late the previous night and was sleeping in, so she decided to go ahead, confident that her son's family would follow later. Surprisingly, only the housekeeper, Little Wong, showed up, and there was still no sign of Xu Zong's family. As all the guests took their seats, Mrs. Chung grew uneasy and approached the housekeeper to inquire. Little Wong explained that she had slept in an upstairs room the previous night this morning. When she went downstairs, she noticed the curtains on the 4th floor were still drawn. She knocked on the door but heard no response. Assuming the family had already left for the banquet, Wong also headed out. Hearing this, Mrs. Chung became extremely anxious and called her son again, but still received no answer as the wedding reception was about to end, and still with no sign of her son's family. Mrs. Chung grew increasingly worried. She immediately took a taxi with Wong to check on the situation at home. The house was eerily quiet. Negative thoughts began to flood Mrs. Chang's mind as she urged the housekeeper to quickly open the door. Once inside, Mrs. Chung rushed to the 4th floor. She found the door slightly ajar and pushed it open, only to see her son lying motionless on the bed, covered in blood. Overcome with fear, Mrs. Chung screamed and then collapsed from a heart attack. Hearing the commotion, Little Wong rushed upstairs. The scene left her in shock, struggling to stay calm. She helped Mrs. Chung and called the police and an ambulance. Her voice trembled as she spoke to the authorities. The police reassured her and asked for details they learned from the housekeeper that a murder had occurred at Zhu Zong's residence. Recognizing the severity of the case involving a government official, the police quickly dispatched a 5-member investigation team to Xiong's home. When the investigation team arrived, medical personnel had already placed Mrs. Chung Xu Zong's mother in an ambulance to be taken to the hospital. The crime scene was identified as 2 rooms on the 4th floor of the villa. Upon entering the scene, all the investigators were shocked by what they saw. The police immediately set up a barrier to seal off the entrance to Zhu Zong's home. Both Mr. and Mrs. Zong were found dead in the bedroom on the 4th floor. Shuang had 2 deep wounds, one on his neck and another on his abdomen. The once relatively new white tank top he was wearing was now soaked with blood. His head remained on the pillow, indicating that he had been attacked and killed while still asleep, without any chance to defend himself. Based on the depth of the wounds, the police determined that the murder weapon was likely a dagger or a folding knife. With a blade about 20 centimeters long, his wife Ling Shan was found dead. In a corner of the room, she had been attacked on the head and chest. The head wound was likely caused by a blunt object, possibly a hammer. The assailant had struck her with such force that her head was crushed and bleeding. With most injuries concentrated around her face, the brutal nature of the attack suggested a deep-seated hatred towards Mrs. Shan. Her neck bore strangulation marks, but the cause of death was determined to be from multiple traumas and acute blood loss. These details indicated that Mrs. Shane may have been tortured before being killed. According to the police, Mr. Zong was attacked first, and Mrs. Shan, who was lying beside him, woke up and tried to flee, but was caught by the assailant. She was strangled and subdued before being killed. The police concluded that the open wounds on both Mr. Zong and Mrs. Sheehan were caused by the same weapon. However, a different weapon was used for the head wound on Mrs. Shan. The investigation team thoroughly examined the room. There were no signs of a struggle. A large amount of cash and jade necklaces in the drawer were untouched. The safe beside the bed was also undisturbed. Under the dressing table, the police found a photo frame with shattered glass and no picture inside. In the hallway trash bin, they found a crumpled photograph of Ling Shan, which likely came from the broken frame in the second room. Two more victims, a male and a female, were found dead on the bed. The victims were identified as Jay and Ju Jong Lin, the children of Mr. Zong and Mrs. Shan. XU and Ju Jong Lene had deep wounds on their left chests. Their legs were straight, the bedsheets were not rumpled, and there were no signs of struggle upon inspection. The police discovered that the weapons used to kill XU and XU Jongin were different. Considering this, the police proposed two possibilities. First, the murderer might have used two weapons simultaneously attacking Ju and Ju Jongin to minimize noise and prevent one from realizing the other was being attacked. Second, there could have been two murderers, each armed with a weapon, attacking one victim, each the latter. Theory gained more support, suggesting the involvement of two assailants. This was because the weapons used to attack Ling Xian included both a sharp and a blunt object, indicating the possibility of two people attacking her. X and XU Jongin's bedroom was tidy with no signs of a struggle. No foreign fingerprints were found at either crime scene. This led to two possibilities. Either the perpetrator wore gloves during the crime, or they meticulously cleaned the scene afterward to avoid detection. Ju Ziyang's villa was quite large. Spanning 7 floors, the first floor was spacious and rented out for storage, except for the 4th and 5th floors, which were in use. The 2nd, 3rd, and 6th floors were unoccupied. The 4th floor was where XU Zong's family lived, while the 5th floor housed Mrs. Chung and the housekeeper Wang. Occasionally, Wang would rest on the 4th floor to prepare breakfast for the Zhu family in the morning. The villa was built very securely with high walls topped with barbed wire, and there were no shoe prints around the perimeter. The door showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting there had been no break-in. Based on these details, the police suspected that the perpetrator might have been someone familiar to the family who was either LED'd in by a family member or had a key to the house. Since all the valuables in the house were untouched, the investigators ruled out robbery as the motive. It was more likely an act of revenge targeting either Mr. Zong or Mrs. Shan without useful clues, and with surveillance systems not yet widespread at the time, the police faced significant challenges in solving the case. As a result, they offered a reward of 50,000 yuan to encourage the public to provide any information or leads related to the case. The investigation revealed that Ju Zong 44 was the director of the local tax bureau branch in District 8, Hio City, Guang Se Province. He was described by colleagues and subordinates as a gentle person. His wife, Ling Shan 44, was a businesswoman involved in various industries, including cement sales and real estate development. Given their significant business dealings, their social network was relatively complex. Shuang and Ling Shan had a 14-year-old daughter, XWE, and a 15-year-old son, XU Yonggen, both attending a local school. The children were well-behaved, had good academic records, and were liked by their teachers and peers as the investigation team worked wirelessly to uncover the truth behind the horrific massacre. The residents of Hio City began to form their own theories. Some believed that Ju Zong had embezzled public funds with accomplices, leading to a fallout and retribution. Others suspected that Mr. Zong had created conflicts and enmities during his work, resulting in this tragic outcome. However, the investigation revealed that Ju Ziyan worked in a small town with limited power and only 6 subordinates. His income was modest, with most of the family's finances coming from Mrs. Shan's business ventures. Juzi was not involved in embezzlement or bribery and did not have any deep-seated grudges, as rumored. Initially, the investigation team focused on the sole survivor of the massacre, the housekeeper, Little Wang. They conducted intense interrogations. but little Wang continually wept. It was discovered that little Wang was a cousin of Mr. Zong and had been supported by his family due to her difficult circumstances and lack of a husband. She had worked there for many years, living rentier and earning a salary. Leading a relatively comfortable life, neighbors described Wang as kind, honest, and well-mannered, given her physical disability and difficulty moving. The police determined that she had a low motive and capability for committing the crime, thus ruling her out as a suspect. The investigation team then delved deeper into the victim's social relationships through Ling Shan's sister, Ling Zia. She revealed that her brother-in-law was not a good person. Despite being married to her sister for a long time, he continued to secretly see his ex-girlfriend. This situation caused Ling Shan to consider ending her life multiple times. There had been conflicts and arguments between Zhu Zong and his ex-girlfriend's husband. Ling Zan's social relationships were also complicated. She had been previously married but divorced her first husband, Sagang, when the relationship soured. Despite Xie Guang's attempts to reconcile, Ling Xian eventually remarried Zhu Yang and had 2 children recently. Sagang had approached Xian asking her to leave her current husband and return to him. Knowing that Zhu Zong was unfaithful, Xian felt somewhat sympathetic and often met with her ex-husband. Both Zong and Xian had extramarital relationships, leading to frequent conflicts and disagreements, according to housekeeper Little Wang. The couple argued every few days. Little Wang occasionally overheard their arguments. Zong disliked Xan's habit of going out for social drinks in the evenings, while Xian resented her husband's ongoing relationship with his ex-girlfriend. Based on the testimonies of Little Wang and Ling Xia, the investigation team identified 2 primary suspects. First, Xiaoyan's ex-husband Zia Gong, and second, Zhang Xu. Jin, the husband of Zong's ex-girlfriend, with additional manpower. The team split into 3 groups, one to continue searching for clues and analyzing the crime scene, a second to visit S.E. Wang's residence, and a third to investigate Jiangshu Jin Seg Wang. 45 currently worked as a taxi driver in HJO City. When the police arrived at his home, he was surprised and unaware of the reason for their visit. After being informed of Ling Shan's murder, Sagang was shocked and claimed he had no knowledge of the incident during the subsequent conversation. The investigation team did not mention that Cheyenne's husband and children were also dead, but Guang eagerly discussed their deaths. This raised suspicious eye that Guang was trying to act innocent but inadvertently revealed his knowledge. When the investigators pressed Guang, he admitted to lying. In fact, he was aware of the massacre at his ex-wife's home but pretended otherwise to avoid trouble when asked about his whereabouts at around 1 a.m. On May 2nd, Seg Wang stated that he had been driving a regular customer to District 8 House City. Since this location was close to Xu Zong's house, the police were highly suspicious. However, Sagang Volun provided the dashcam footage from that night, which ultimately confirmed his alibi. The second investigation team visited the home of Zhang's ex-girlfriend and discovered that Jiang Sujin and his wife had left for Yunnan at 4:30 a.m. on May 2nd. Why would he leave for Yunnan so early in the morning? Could he have committed the crime and fled with his family? Wondered one investigator the team then questioned. The neighbors about Jiang Sujin's recent behavior and social relationships. Neighbors described Jiang Dujian as an idle gambler, while his wife Duan was a housewife. Their economic situation was poor, and the couple frequently argued about money and their children. Despite being married, Duan's attractive appearance attracted attention from many men. Recently, some people had seen Zhu Zong and Du Yan together in a car acting very intimate. Based on this information, the police suspected that Jiang Zhu might have discovered his wife's affair and planned to kill Xu Zong's family in revenge. However, further information revealed that on the night of May 1st and the early hours of May 2nd, Jiang Xu Jin and his wife were at the hospital caring for his mother at 4:30 a.m. On May 2nd, his mother's condition worsened and she had to be transferred to another facility with Jiang Xu Jin and Du Yan. Accompanying her, both primary suspects had Elias leaving the investigation team with no choice but to return to the crime scene to discuss new strategies while searching for clues in the villa. The police found Ling Shan's ledger in a cabinet. The ledger meticulously recorded daily transactions. Based on this, the police investigated over 10 people who had borrowed money from the victim's family but found no suspects as the case reached a dead end. Ling Shan's sister Ling Sawa revealed that her husband Li Lang had a financial dispute with her sister. "My husband worked for my sister, basically supervising the construction site," Ling Shawa complained, but in reality he was more like a servant. Never getting any rest, he asked for a raise several times but was always denied from Xia's information. The police learned that Ellie Lang had previously worked at a passenger transport center. He then left that job to work for Ling Shan, who had promised him a monthly salary of 2,000 yuan, approximately $275 with room and board. However, Li Lang only received 1,500 yuan per month and was provided meals, but no accommodation. This discrepancy led the police to suspect that Li Lang could be the perpetrator. However, during the investigation, Li Lang provided evidence proving his innocence. Once again, the leads went cold and the investigation seemed to be at a standstill. The residents of Jisoo City grew increasingly anxious, not knowing who the true killer was or why they had so brutally murdered the family. People feared they might be the next target. These concerns, along with mounting criticism, put immense pressure on the investigation team to solve this severe case quickly. On May 8, 2011, City Police increased the reward from 50,000 yuan to 200,000 yuan, equivalent to $27,500. Despite receiving 80 to 90 calls daily, none had been helpful for the investigation. The investigation team decided to re-examine the crime scene. This time they made a crucial discovery. They found a sock print in the dust on the floor of an empty room on the 6th floor, and a slipper print at the crime scene on the 4th floor. Analysis revealed that the sock print on the 6th floor belonged to a man approximately 1.6 meters tall, while the slipper print on the 4th floor was partial and belonged to a woman. Based on this, the police speculated that after committing the crime, the perpetrator wiped away fingerprints and shoe prints, but failed to completely clean the slipper print. The slipper, identified by Mrs. Chung and housekeeper Wong, was an indoor slipper that Wong had placed by the door size 37, but it was now missing. From this information, the investigators deduced that there were at least one male and one female suspect. The male was about 1.65 meters tall and the female was under 1.6 meters tall. They had a key to the Zhu family's house and were familiar with the victims. The suspects had premeditated the crime, sneaked into the house late at night, and calmly cleaned the crime scene. Erasing fingerprints from door handles and stair railings, the police then investigated the whereabouts of the house keys. The 7-story house had the first floor rented out for storage, and the 2nd, 3rd, 6th, and 7th floors were unoccupied. The Zhu family lived on the 4th floor, while housekeeper Little Wong and Mrs. Chun stayed on the 5th floor to enter the Zhu family's bedroom. The perpetrator needed a key to the house and the 4th floor. Thus, the murderer had a full set of Zhu family keys. The family had 5 sets of keys, one for each of the couple, one for Mrs. Chung. One scared by the 2 children, and a spare set kept hidden after the incident. All 5 sets of keys were found, indicating that the perpetrator had made a duplicate key. The police launched an investigation into the relatives and friends of the Zhu family who might have had access to the keys 10 days after the murder. Mrs. Chung, who had been bedridden with grief, started to recover. She remembered that a few months prior she had stayed at her daughter's house for a while and was given the keys. Feeling uncomfortable, she returned to her old home with her daughter Ling Shawa. After a few days, she gave the keys to Shawa to return, meaning Shawa had held the keys and had the opportunity to duplicate them with this new lead. The police focused on Ling Shawa, noting that she was about 1.6 meters tall and wore size 37 shoes, matching the description of the female suspect. Investigating secretly, they found that Ling Shawa had called her sister the day before the murder and had made multiple calls to a young man named Luing between 8 p.m. and 2 to 3 a.m. On the night of the crime, further investigation revealed that Lu Xingming was the boyfriend of Sujia Xia's niece, along with Xia's suspicious actions. Xiangming matched the description of the male suspect at the crime scene. Neighbors reported that Su's brother Suaj Zhang, who had a limp, was seen near the victim's house on the night of the murder. He often visited his aunt Shan, making him memorable to the neighbors suspecting their involvement. The police planned to apprehend Suya and Xiangming, however. Just as they prepared to arrest them, Suya and Xiangming fled Hao City. The investigation team tracked them as they traveled from Fushan to Yonggo City, Hunan, then to Zhuang and finally to Dunhuan City, Guangdong Province. It seemed they were trying to escape, continuously moving across various cities. On May 18th of 2011, the police apprehended suspects Ling Shaowa, Sukjiang Suya, and Luing Ming. After evading capture, the four were finally arrested at a hotel in Guangdong Province, faced with intense interrogation. Sujia broke down in tears and fearfully confessed she admitted that Ling Shaowa had given her the keys to Ling Shan's house to make duplicates. A year ago, Ling Shaowa had already begun plotting to murder her sister's family. Despite Sua's attempts to dissuade her, she couldn't prevent Ling Shaowa from carrying out her plan this time. Ling Shaowa hid her intentions from Suya and convinced her boyfriend Lu Xingming to commit the crime together. After hours of denial, Ling Shaowa finally admitted that Su's account was accurate. Ling Shaowa confessed that she had harbored deep resentment towards her sister. For a long time, she wanted to kill Ling Shan's entire family so that her mother would inherit the family assets, which she then planned to manipulate for her own gain. Her confession left all the investigators present in shock. Born in 1975 into a modest farming family in Achou City, Guangxi Province. Ling Shaowa was one of 5 siblings. Shane was the third child with an older sister and brother and 2 younger siblings. Due to financial hardships, none of the 5 siblings could continue their education for long. The daughters married soon after leaving school. Ling Xie, petite and charming with a talent for conversation. Married well, her husband indulged her every desire, allowing Shaowa to regularly send money to her parents. At the same time, her second sister, Shan, struggled with a difficult marriage and financial instability. Xia's first husband was a traffic cop responsible for managing office seals, which made her feel proud back then. My brother-in-law often needed help and frequently borrowed money from my husband. Xia recounted, "I felt like a queen at my parents' home shortly after Ling Shane divorced. Left penniless and jobless, feeling pity for her sister, Shaowa requested money from her husband to support Cheyenne and wholeheartedly helped her start a business with determination and skill. Ling Cheyenne successfully launched her business, largely thanks to her family support, especially from her sister, Ling Shaowa. Later, Shan met and remarried Zhu Zong, the director of the local tax bureau. Together, they built a happy home with 2 children, and their business flourished, improving their financial status just when it seemed the sisters had both achieved their desired lives. Xia's marriage fell apart. She left her husband with nothing. Ling Shaowa then married Lo, an ordinary employee at a transport company. Li Hao was kind but timid and incompetent with a limited earning capacity. From this point, Xian replaced Xia's position of prestige, once living in luxury, admired by everyone. Shaowa suddenly lost everything, leaving her deeply dissatisfied and disheartened. Her pain was exacerbated by the fact that she had always been considered the smartest and most beloved among her siblings. But now her second sister, Shan, had taken that place. Shan's success grew. She built a mansion, bought luxury cars, developed real estate, and provided jobs for many relatives, earning everyone's respect and dependence. Cheyenne was now the revered family member, while Shaowa felt like nothing more than a puppet. Ling Zhan had borrowed more than 400,000 yuan, approximately $55,000 from Xia, to finance her business operations. As a result, Shaowa believed that her sister's business success was due to her help and felt she deserved a share of the profits. Shaowa had approached Cheyenne several times about this issue, but was always dismissed. She felt that her sister, who had become successful with her help, was now ungrateful and disdainful, refusing to share any profits. This sense of betrayal and resentment grew stronger over time. Their eldest sister, Ling Zhang, suffered from diabetes and heart disease as her condition worsened. Shaowa frequently visited and cared for her, while Shane rarely appeared. Only covering part of the medical expenses, Shaowa was discontented, believing Shane was stingy and heartless, unwilling to fully support their struggling family. On the night of May 1st, Ling Shaowa called Ling Shan to borrow money again. Perhaps because she had borrowed too many times, Shan refused with an irritated tone. Ling Shan shouted over the phone, "Useless. Why don't you use your brain to think of a way to get rich? Stop relying on others just because they're wealthy. I've given you enough. I won't lend you another penny." These words felt like a slap in the face. Deeply wounding Shawa, she felt like a beggar. Her rage exploding, and she decided to exact revenge on her ungrateful sister that night. Ling Shawa called Su Kang and Luing Ming, promising that once the plan succeeded, she would take 200,000 yuan from her mother's inheritance and split it with them, tempted by greed. Shunming and Su Kang immediately agreed late on the night of May 1st, 2011. This group used the key to sneak into ex-Zong's house and brutally murdered the 4 members of Zong's family on the 4th floor. The killers first targeted ex-Zong's 2 children, then Zong and Shan Ling. Zong suffered the longest and died last. Their swift and simultaneous actions prevented any noise. They used duct tape to silence Ling Xa, Yin rendering her unable to scream for help. Ling Zia's initial plan was to kill her mother as well, so the inheritance would be transferred to her. However, that night, Mrs. Chung was at the hospital caring for her daughter, Ling Sang, and was not at home after committing the murders. The group wiped away fingerprints and bloodstains, but failed to clean everything completely. Leaving evidence that incriminated them, Ling Xia Su Kang and Luing Ming were sentenced to death in the first trial. They appealed, and Ling Shawa requested a psychiatric evaluation. She repeatedly emphasized that her motive was not money, but the emotional betrayal by her sister on April 1st. 2012, the court rejected the appeals of Ling Shawa and her accomplices. Upon verification, the court found that Ling Shawa and her family had no history of mental illness and were fully capable of civil conduct when the crime was committed. Therefore, her request for a psychiatric forensic evaluation was also denied. The death sentences were carried out in January 2013. In this case, Ling Shawa Krui, along with her accomplices, murdered her sister's entire family. Out of impulsive thoughts, Xia's actions brought immense misfortune, not only to the victims, but also to herself and her own family. Both Shane and Shawa had their faults. One was overly focused on money and was stingy, while the other had extreme tendencies and harbored jealousy, leading both into a tragic downfall. As for Xia's accomplices, their moral integrity was overshadowed by material greed, and they ultimately paid a high price for their heinous actions. Story 5, the phone rang several times, but no one picked up at 11 a.m. On August 9th, 1999, Zillian called her sister's house in Anhai Town, Jinjiang City, Fuan Province, China, but no one answered, thinking her sister and brother-in-law were busy. Zillian called again around 4 p.m., but still no one picked up at this point. She sensed something was wrong. Zillian's sister lived a wealthy life, staying home all day as a housewife, caring for her children. If she had to go out unexpectedly, her 2 daughters would still be home after several unanswered calls to the landline. Zillian tried calling her nieces and brother-in-law's mobile phones, but no one answered. She decided to go to her sister's house to check upon opening the door. She immediately smelled gas and hurried inside, calling for her sister and brother-in-law, but got no response searching the house. She found her sister's bedroom door slightly ajar. Inside, her nieces were tied to the bed with ropes and were no longer breathing. She quickly ran to notify the neighborhood security guard, who then called the police. Within 10 minutes, the police arrived at the scene. From Zillian information, the police identified the victims as the homeowner, Waya vice president of the Hungan Group, his wife Kugin, and their 2 daughters Wan and Wudong Hong, both working for their father's company. Entering the house, the police were hit by the strong smell of gas. The living room showed no signs of disorder, and the main door was undamaged, indicating it had been opened from the inside. The first bedroom on the left was where the 2 daughters were murdered. The door was wide open, and they were tied with ties with their eyes and mouths taped shut. Their bodies bore no open wounds, and they had been suffocated. The room was tidy, with a black handbag on the bed and another bag on the floor. Its contents spilled out. Their money and jewelry were intact, except for their mobile phones, which were missing in the adjacent bedroom. The police poly found Wo's body His hands and feet were tied, and he had 3 fatal wounds on his neck, with blood splattered across the room. The killer had been ruthless. The bed had a pillow with a small bloodstain deliberately flipped over and placed back. The window was closed and the curtains drawn. C. Eugen was found dead. In the 3rd bedroom, also bound and suffocated like the others near the window. In her room, the police found a phone off the hook as if she had tried to call for help but couldn't through investigation. The police learned that Woa had 3 children, 1 son and 2 daughters. His son, WBA, worked for Hunan, a company under the Hanan Group, but in early 1999, WBA was severely injured in a car accident and died. After rescue efforts failed, the eldest daughter, Yoon, who was murdered at 27, had studied in Singapore and was responsible for external reception at the Hanan Group. The youngest daughter, Wudong Hong, graduated from Wata University in Guangzhou in 1998, was beautiful, easygoing, and worked in finance at the Hanan Group. The only surviving family member was the daughter-in-law, Yaminan, who was out on an errand and thus escaped the tragedy. Yaminan, who was married to WBA for 3 years, had no children. She had returned to her parents' home after work before the incident occurred, narrowly avoiding disaster. The victim, Woya, was the former vice president of the Hanan Group with assets worth hundreds of millions of yuan. Initially, the police suspected the killer was after money, but there were no clear signs of theft and not much appeared to be missing. This led them to believe the motive might be personal. Vendetta, late on the night of August 9, 1999, a special task force of 60 criminal investigators was formed. The city and provincial police leaders took the case very seriously. The police station building in Onghai Town, Xinjiang City, was brightly lit. All officers in charge of the case were busy in investigating this bloody and brutal murder. Based on the victim's belongings, investigators determined that 3 mobile phones and some other valuables were missing at first glance. The crime scene appeared to be a robbery, but there were few signs of ransacking and some cash was left in the room. So what was the motive behind the killer's actions? The investigation proceeded and a province-wide cooperation notice was issued. Forensic doctors estimated the victim's time of death. The first to die was Coogan around 10 a.m., next were the 2 daughters around 10:30 a.m., and finally Woya around 12:30 p.m. The time of W's death was over 2 hours after Coogan. If the killer came for money, he could have taken it after killing Coogan. Why did he stay to kill the entire family before leaving? Once again, the police were certain the motive was not robbery. Wei Jie's house was located in the Hanan Group's company dormitory where all the company's management staff lived. The incident happened at noon, and some neighbors in the residential area were having lunch, but no one heard any commotion from W's apartment on the 5th floor. Coincidentally, the Hanan Group's chairman, who lived on the 4th floor, was out with his family that day, and the 6th floor was under renovation and unoccupied. 2 suspicious points were raised by some police officers. First, the victim's family lived in the Hanan Group's residential area, and the main door of Woyo's house showed no signs of forced entry. This implied that the perpetrator might have been someone familiar to the homeowner, or at least someone the homeowner trusted enough to let inside second. Some speculated that the daughter-in-law, young Miman, might be involved in the crime, although not much property was stolen from the house. The killer might have been after the family's substantial fortune. Young Miman couldn't inherit the entire estate if only Woa was dead. But if the entire family was gone, the vast fortune would belong to her. Based on these suspicions, young Miman became the first suspect the police then investigated Wai Mian's activities that day. It was found that she had returned to her parents' home the night before the incident. The next day, she stayed at her office all day, never leaving for more than 15 minutes. And her company was quite far from the house, making it unlikely that she was the perpetrator. Meanwhile, another police team investigated the Hanan Group's employees. According to the investigation, YG's family was known to be friendly and kind to relatives and colleagues with no known conflicts. Since they worked at the same company, the 2 daughters usually went home with their father, but on the day of the incident, they went home earlier because their father was busy during the investigation. The company director provided a new lead. Woya had recently been visiting the Amping Hotel to meet a woman based on information provided by the Hanan Group's executive director. The police immediately identified the woman as Tang Men from Jingmen City Hub Province. Their investigation revealed that Tang Men had business dealings with the Henan Group. A few years ago, she had been living in Guangdong but recently appeared in Xinjiang for unclear reasons and checked into the Amping Hotel a few days before the incident. Coincidentally, Tang Men had been staying at the Amping Hotel until the day of the incident, when she mysteriously disappeared in the afternoon. The police promptly summoned Tang Min. She seemed confused and unaware of the situation when she saw the police. They informed her about the Weiyo family's murder, which shocked her. Tang Min explained that she had known Weiyo for a long time and that he had helped her many times as a boss. She was very grateful to him. She had come to Xinjiang to seek his help in establishing a beauty salon. Tang Man added, "I met him on the Eth and left on high on the morning of the 9th. I had arranged to meet him at a coffee shop on the afternoon of the 9th. But when I called him that afternoon, no one answered." After the police investigation, Tang Man was cleared of any involvement in the case. In mid-August, August 1999, the police publicly announced a reward of 200,000 yuan, around $30,000, for any leads from the public. The substantial reward garnered significant attention, resulting in numerous calls to the police within a short period. A few days later, a man rushed to the task force to report something on the night of August 11th. I overheard 3 villagers talking about making a big score in Anhai. These 3 villagers, who had always been idle and so poor that they struggled to eat, suddenly became wealthy. Hearing this, the police immediately began investigating the 3 individuals and found an amount of money in the suspects' homes that matched the scene of the crime. Although the source of the money was unclear, the neighbors' suspicions and the men's suspicious behavior led the police to summon all 3 for questioning. These individuals were Qinzhen Lian and Linen. Upon seeing the police, all 3 men tried to flee. The police gave chase and quickly apprehended them before the police could even ask any questions. Lin Chen blurted out, "I didn't do anything. It was the other 2 who lured me into it." The police were surprised, as they hadn't mentioned anything yet. If they were innocent, why would they panic and flee during the interrogation? The police finally mentioned the Wu family case. The 3 men insisted they didn't know anyone named Wu and had never committed any murders. They explained that their recent behavior stemmed from financial desperation, leading them to form a gang that extorted and occasionally stole vehicles from Xinjiang residents on August 9th. When the murder occurred, the 3 were threatening and extorting money from a fellow Xinjiang native, making it impossible for them to have committed the crime after verifying their alibi with the fellow native. The police confirmed their story. Despite their criminal activities, the 3 men were detained and further investigated. The case saw no progress for a month, affecting Henan stock stability, prompting the board to offer a $1,000 reward for any leads. A few months later, on December 26th, 1999, Wei Ji's daughter-in-law, Yang Yanen, received a phone call from a man in Xiamen. He claimed he had been hired to commit the murders and that his employer was now planning to kill him. To cover up the crime, he told young Mian that if she was willing to pay $1,000, he would turn himself and along with her to the police without giving her a chance to respond. The man said he would call back the next day. Initially, young Yenin was skeptical, as many people had been bothering her for months due to the reward. After some thought, Ai Yan decided to inform the police about the call the following day, December 27th. 1999, the victim's family received another call from the same man by tracking and tracing the phone number. The police discovered that the call came from a public phone in Xiamen. Upon investigating all public phones in the area, they found that 2 calls were made during that time frame. The first call was to Wo Eiji's daughter-in-law, Young Yan. The second call was to WBA. But why was WBA involved? In this case, he had been dead for some time. The police began questioning why someone would call a deceased person, or if the caller was unaware that WBA had died. Either way, the police were certain that this person knew the Wu family. After further investigation, the police identified the caller as Wu Honka. Surprisingly, Wu Honka was from the same village as Woi and had been a primary school classmate of WBA. His home was less than 100 meters from the Wu family's home in Lingu village. On Hai Tuan, the police immediately went to Lingu village on Hai Tuan that night, and learned from his family that Wu Honka had left home 3 months earlier. They had not been in contact with him and did not know his whereabouts before leaving. He had told his family that he was going out to do business. Although they did not find their target, the investigators searched his home and successfully extracted Wu Han's fingerprints. After careful identification by technicians, the police confirmed that Wonka's fingerprints matched with those found at the crime scene. The investigation into Wu Honka social connections revealed that he had been in contact with Wu Yong from Shenzhen multiple times. The police immediately split into 2 teams. One rushed to Shenzhen to find Wu Yong, while the other focused on analyzing Wonka's social connections and attempting to locate him. When they met Wu Yong, he claimed not to know the suspect, but mentioned that his sister was close to him. However, his sister had returned to their hometown in Sichuan, and Wong asked the police to come back later. When she returned, Wong's attitude was highly suspicious as he repeatedly tried to dismiss the police. The more he tried to avoid them, the more suspicious the police became. They requested to search his apartment, but Wu Yong immediately refused the police, then threatened that if he didn't allow the search, they would consider him an accomplice. Hearing this, Wong reluctantly agreed to let the police in. Besides the living room, the apartment had 2 bedrooms, one of which belonged to his sister. As soon as they opened his sister's door, the police noticed a package of food on the table. The bed sheets were disturbed and the mattress was still warm, indicating someone had been there. Realizing she couldn't hide any longer, Wong's sister came out of the closet. She was the woman Wu Honka had been frequently contacting, according to her. She hadn't seen him in a long time. However, when the police checked her phone messages, they found numerous messages from unknown numbers. She claimed she hadn't met him recently, but he had been texting her, asking to stay with her for a few days. She had refused, but he continued to text her from different numbers when asked why they were avoiding the police. Wong said he was unaware of his sister's connection to Wu Honka. After hearing her story about his persistent requests, despite her refusals, Wong had told his sister to be wary of him when the police unexpectedly came to investigate Wu Han's whereabouts. They were frightened and didn't want to get involved. The police then collected information on the unknown numbers that had texted the sister, tracking these numbers. They finally apprehended Wu Honka. Hiding in Xinjiang on January 18, 2000, Wu Honka, born in 1971, was from the same village as Wu Ji. He was the eldest of 4 children with 3 younger sisters. He got married in 1993 and had a daughter. Wu Honka had a violent nature, never read books, and enjoyed drinking, gambling, and fighting after graduating at 15. He worked for 8 years in an auto parts factory owned by his uncle. At 23, he returned to his hometown to start a family with the support of his father-in-law. He bought some machinery and opened a small auto parts processing plant. Making some money, his lifestyle changed and he began frequenting high-end places like restaurants, nightclubs, and bars. However, his good times didn't last long. Within a year, his small business could no longer support the lavish lifestyle he desired. He sold some of his machinery to make meat, but business declined further and he eventually sold everything. From a business owner, he became a drifter. His drinking worsened and he began violently abusing his wife and daughter. At this point, he remembered his primary school friend WBA and his wealthy family. He planned to borrow money, but was prepared to eliminate them if they refused. On the morning of August 9, 1999, he concealed a knife and tape on himself and posed as a plastic sales representative to visit their home. Wu Sherry's wife, Zani, recognized him as a fellow villager and a friend of her late son, so she let him in without suspicion. Once inside, Wu Honka explained his connection to her son and asked for a loan. When Zina refused his unreasonable request, he argued with her. She asked him to leave and moved to the window to call security. Wu Honka then attacked her, strangling her until she stopped breathing, and tied her up to stage a robbery after the murder. Wu Honka searched for cash and accidentally encountered Weirun and Wu Donghong, who had just returned home and were unaware of their mother's fate. He broke into their room, threatened them with a knife, and tied them up. Using ties, he closed the windows, drew the curtains, and strangled both sisters to death. Having committed the murders, Wu Honka felt he needed to find some money to justify his crime. He searched the house methodically, which explained why the police found no signs of a high ransacking. After finding over 6,000 yuan in cash, he was about to flee when he heard the front door open. Startled, he hid behind the door and drew his knife. When he saw someone enter, the person was none other than Wei Ji. He forced Wei Ji into the bedroom and tied him up. Recognizing Wu Honka Wei, I offered him any amount of money he wanted, hoping to avoid further violence. However, having already murdered 3 people, Wu Honka knew there was no turning back and had no intention of sparing Wei. Wu Honka first tried to smother him with a quilt, but when Wei struggled fiercely, he stabbed him in the neck 3 times. Killing him after committing the murders, Wu Honka took a gold necklace from Wei Chi's body and fled to Lingo village. With the stolen money before leaving, he cut the gas line. Fearing anyone might still be alive after committing the crime, Wu Honka used the stolen money for gambling and partying quickly, spending it all when he heard that the Henan group had offered a $1 million reward for information on the perpetrator. His greed and desperation led him to call the Wu family's daughter-in-law, Yang Min, pretending to have information in hopes of claiming the reward. Wu Honka confessed that during his time hiding in the village, he was plagued by nightmares. He often dreamt of the Wu family standing by his bed staring at him, or of the police bursting in to arrest him. Unable to bear it any longer, he left home. Wu Honka explained that he only felt safe in crowded places, spending nights in dormitories with colleagues or staying with acquaintances to get some sleep, because Wu Honka committed the crime alone and left few clues at the scene. The case took a long time to solve. On December 20th, 2002, the Chuano Intermediate People's Court found Wu Honka guilty of intentional homicide and robbery, sentencing him to death after the first trial. Wu Honka appealed, arguing that the details in the first trial were unclear and that the death penalty could lead to a wrongful conviction. After a second trial lasting 9 months, the Provincial High People's Court concluded that the evidence proved Wu Honka acted alone. Firstly, the 4 victims were all tied up with their mouths taped shut, showing consistent methods and details for fingerprints extracted from the binding ropes and tape at the crime scene matched Wonka's fingerprints. Secondly, the victims returned home one after another and were killed in 3 separate bedrooms, fitting Wu Han's confession of killing the 4 victims within 3 hours after being brought to justice. Wu Honka confessed multiple times with his crime details corroborated by other evidence. Thirdly, in the 2 years after the first trial, Wu Honka never provided any substantial evidence suggesting others were involved, nor did he offer any specific clues indicating other culprits. There was no evidence pointing to anyone else's involvement. Ultimately, after 2 trials, the lower court upheld the original death sentence for Wu Honka the Special. At over 4,000 kilometers across 16 provinces and cities and 36 counties, interviewing more than 10,000 people and investigating nearly 1,000 leads. Solving this brutal massacre was an enormous effort, besides the savage nature of the crime. Why did the vice president's murder captivate so much media attention? Let's explore who YG was. YG was one of the founding members of the Henan Group before his murder. He owned over 24 million shares of the company, valued at over 70 million Hong Kong dollars, born in 1948 in a farming family in Lingu village. Fuan Province, Wei Ji had to help care for his 3 siblings from a young age. As he grew up, Wei Ji worked in various jobs such as mountain clearing and fertilizer. Hauling the hardships he endured in his rural home shaped his hardworking nature and resilience. In 1985, he co-founded the Henan Industrial Company with Su Waosu Lini and others. Serving as the general manager to develop the company, he traveled nationwide to promote their products. Overcoming numerous challenges to establish a sales market, in December 1998, the company successfully listed in Hong Kong, boasting 8 subsidiaries. In the months before his murder, YG was highly respected in Linga village. He had been a renowned architect with many houses he built. Still standing in the village socially, YG was very community-minded, donating tens of millions of yuan to public wealth. Where activities, his family also donated 10 million yuan to the local charity federation, establishing a family charity fund given Wo YG's influence, his tragic murder. drew intense media attention, adding pressure on the police. Money can lure people into the trap of crime, but it is essential to remember that money is just a material possession. It can be used in life, but it cannot be taken. Beyond death, as the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper. Thank you for joining me here at Sherlock Holmes. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware, even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. If you've enjoyed tonight's tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep, and until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.